Hello everyone, today we will learn about another case. The case of Jemma Mitchell. In June 2021, a devout Christian, Mee Kuen Chong, also known as Deborah, disappeared without a trace. Her friends had no idea what to do in this situation, as it was extremely out of character for her, especially since Deborah was vulnerable, a weak woman who could not stand up for herself. Just when the investigation began to gain momentum, a heartbreaking discovery was made. A long series of CCTV footage led the authorities to a cold-blooded killer. This crime story happened quite recently in the UK and tells the story of one of the first women whose sentencing was broadcast live on television. All happened in northwest London, where 67-year-old Deborah lived in her home. She was born and raised in Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia, but later moved to the Wembley area of the UK in 2004. She lived alone and shared her two-story house with a tenant. Deborah was a parishioner of the Emmanuel Church Center, located about 6 miles from her home. Being a pious woman, she regularly attended church services. Neighbors described Deborah as a cheerful, active, but slightly eccentric older woman who regularly visited her neighbors' houses for tea and company. As Deborah was a believer and a frequent churchgoer, she met many people over the years, which helped her fit in and become part of her local Wembley community. However, not all was well in her life. Unfortunately, Deborah suffered from several mental health issues, was diagnosed with paranoid schizophrenia and acute stress. Fortunately, Deborah had a few people she could rely on, and one of the women she became close to was a 38-year-old named Jemma Mitchell. Jemma previously lived in Australia for 7 years. She was an osteopath who decided to return to the UK in 2015. Her mother and sister lived in Brent, North Wembley, and Jemma stayed with them. Her family was relatively well off. She received a good education and then went to King's College London, where she earned a degree in humanities that included a course in experimental anatomy. During her studies, Jemma proved to be an outstanding medical student and received awards for her knowledge of the human body. Her mother worked for the British Foreign Office, and the family's property in London was valued at approximately $5 million. Unfortunately, the family had recently fallen on hard times. The house was abandoned and in urgent need of repair. Jemma presented herself as a pious person, which was similar to Deborah. They met at the church in August 2020. Unfortunately, Jemma was unable to work as an osteopath in the UK due to the discrepancy between Australian and British practices and found herself essentially without a job. However, to bring Deborah closer, Jemma offered her services as a spiritual healer to help Deborah cope with her mental disorders. It is clear that this could not in any way address Deborah's current problems, as her schizophrenia persisted. By the spring of 2021, she was prescribed stronger medications. The people around her began to notice that Deborah had become more vulnerable and prone to strange behavior. In recent months, she had developed an obsession with Prince Charles and Boris Johnson. It's quite a sad story. Deborah believed that she had a parasocial relationship with Prince Charles and she could talk to him through a video on YouTube. She often set the table for the Prince and Boris Johnson as if they were going to show up at her house at any moment. After sending them several strange letters, she received a referral for psychiatric treatment. After Deborah was admitted to a medical facility for 2 weeks, she was prescribed a new course of medications. Although she did not want to take them, her friends persuaded her to go back. After that, for the most part, Deborah's life returned to normal. Her friends rejoiced with her and looked forward to the summer. However, on June 11, 2021, she suddenly disappeared. On that day, Deborah's lodger began to worry when he could not find her or contact her. Given the current state of her mental health, he knew it would be wise to immediately report this to the authorities. The tenant had seen Deborah the day before, so she could not have been gone for very long. CCTV footage recently confirmed this. The footage showed Deborah walking along Chaplin Road accompanied by her lodger. It is worth noting that Deborah did not walk very well, so if she was on the run, it would have been difficult for her to manage without transportation. As the days passed, it became increasingly obvious that something unusual had happened to Deborah. She had never disappeared like that before. Given her mental health and physical problems, this painted a worrying picture for the authorities. But despite Deborah's silence, some news about her emerged. Jemma informed Deborah's tenant that Deborah had decided to return home to Malaysia to spend time with her family. According to Jemma, Deborah had decided to return home for a year to clear her head. This raised doubts among police officers. To fly to Malaysia, Deborah would have had to present her passport at customs, but there were no stamps recorded on it. No one had seen her leave the house, no local taxi companies had given her a lift, and there was no banking activity indicating that she had used any public transport. Days turned, and there were still no confirmed sightings of Deborah. However, 16 days after she went missing, a discovery was made 200 miles from Wembley. There was a small coastal town called Salcombe. It has beautiful beaches and lovely nature. Many people visit this area as tourists. One woman who came to discover the beauty of new places found much more than she expected. On June 27, 2021, the woman was walking with her family along Bennett Road in Salcombe when she saw a nightmarish scene as she descended the old steps. Nearby lay a decomposing body, and the head was missing. The authorities were immediately called, and upon their arrival, forensic experts found that the body had been dumped along with a church business card and excerpts from the Bible. They soon became known that the body belonged to Mee Kuen Chong. Due to the state of decomposition, an autopsy was unable to determine her exact cause of death. However, it could be said with certainty that she was missing her head. Injuries consistent with an assault were found on her body. Pathologists also believed that Deborah had been dead for about 2 weeks, which was consistent with the time of her disappearance. With the case now classified as a murder, investigators stepped up their efforts to find Deborah's killer, and surprisingly, it didn't take them long to find a potential suspect. CCTV footage from around Deborah's home revealed some very disturbing movements. As officers checked all the friends who knew Deborah, they began to focus on her life. Deborah would periodically hold seances in her garden, and Jemma was often with her. Friends reported that Deborah repeatedly mentioned that Jemma and Jesus healed her. These two women had previously been friends, but at least a week before Deborah disappeared, they may have quarreled over money. This theory was taken into consideration by the officers. Working in the field of osteopathy in Australia, Jemma stated on her professional website that she focused on the genetics of anatomy and the dissection of human cadavers. However, after she returned to England in 2015, she was no longer able to continue her professional life as a result of her circumstances. Jemma worked nowhere else, although she lived with her mother in their old family home in Brent. According to eyewitnesses, the rooms were filled with broken furniture and rubbish. Some rooms were impossible to enter. There were boxes and suitcases, freezers full of food, old mattresses, and building materials everywhere. The kitchen was described as very dirty, with various remains of rotting food on the stove and torn food packaging. The second floor of the house was under renovation, the walls and ceilings were unfinished, there was no roof. The bathroom was stained and in very poor condition. Overall, the whole house looked terrible. Maybe, this house was the cause of the conflict between Deborah and Jemma. According to the collected messages, to renovate Jemma's family home, Deborah was asked to give her £200,000, and Deborah promised her this. However, after a while, Deborah advised Jemma to sell the house and enjoy the money because life is too short. In a subsequent message, Deborah told Jemma that further repairs and construction would cost a lot of money, which Deborah had nothing for. And from that moment on, the relationship between them deteriorated. Over the next few days, Jemma became more and more persistent and aggressive towards Deborah. On June 8, 2021, Deborah finally got tired of listening to Jemma's complaints and sent her an SMS in which she wrote, "Until you resolve the issue with the house, I do not want you to come to me. I am experiencing stress from your presence." Just 3 days after this, Deborah disappeared. Fortunately, many surveillance cameras filled in all the gaps and allowed law enforcement to create a clear picture of what happened. At 6:15 a.m. on June 11th, Jemma was seen leaving her abandoned house with a large travel suitcase and a backpack on her shoulders. At that time, she was wearing a hat. By 6:40 a.m., Jemma had already changed her clothes, covered her face with a mask, and put her backpack inside the suitcase. In this CCTV footage, Jemma can be seen moving towards Deborah's house. At 7:56 a.m., she took off her hat. However, she could still be seen with the suitcase and mask on her face. Presumably, Deborah was tragically killed in the next 4 hours, because at 12:05 p.m., Jemma was again caught on CCTV, this time carrying 2 suitcases. They both seemed quite heavy as she struggled to carry them. The smaller suitcase most likely contained personal belongings and Deborah's financial documents, which Jemma needed for her further actions, as she intended to use them to create a will. Then, she called a taxi to take her with the 2 suitcases to the right address, but Jemma had to wait for the car for 40 minutes. It was only at 4:15 p.m. that she returned home with a large blue suitcase. Later that evening, Jemma went to a hospital located in the center of town for treatment of a broken finger. She told the doctors that she accidentally pinched her finger in a door. In the following days, in an attempt to cover up the crime, Jemma sent several fraudulent emails to a missing persons charity, and she sent a message to Deborah's tenant to say that the lady of the house had gone to Malaysia to visit relatives. Now, let's fast forward a few days and see that Jemma is on the move again. On June 26 at 8:05 a.m., a CCTV camera across the road from her house recorded Jemma booting up as she had rented a car from a car rental company the night before. On the way to Salcombe, she stopped at a gas station, where a surveillance camera captured her entering the store. After this, Jemma drove another 200 miles southwest to a coastal town. She parked her car near Bennett Road at about 9:12 p.m., where she found a secluded spot to dump the body. She was seen leaving the area 41 minutes later by the same camera. Now, despite being caught on several surveillance cameras, Jemma thought her plan had worked out well. However, there was one part of her carefully thought out scheme that even she couldn't predict. On the way back to London, her rental car had a ruptured inner tube, so Jemma had to stop at a service station and call a repairman to change the tire. This man still remembers his strange encounter with her. She seemed confused and bewildered, insisted that he not climb into the trunk of her car, not to mention putting a tire in there. Additionally, she wanted to keep the old flat tire. The repairman also noted that the car had a strange, heavy, and musty smell, as if someone had been sleeping in it without any ventilation. Unfortunately, he didn't know this at the time, but the car smelled of death when he had her tire fixed. Jemma returned home, where she returned the Volvo and threw the blue suitcase on the roof of a barn belonging to one of the neighbors. The very next day, Deborah's decapitated body was found. The authorities would need another 5 days to find her head. All these clues naturally pointed to Jemma, and the authorities decided to pay a small visit to her 15 minutes before midnight, taking her into custody. Jemma was immediately handcuffed, and the police began to search the house, looking for evidence that could link Jemma to Deborah's murder. As a result, Deborah's personal belongings and financial documents were found, as well as a fake will from Deborah that had been created on a computer. In this will, Jemma named herself and her mother as the beneficiaries of Deborah's entire estate, which was valued at the time at approximately £700,000. Jemma's first official interrogation was held 2 days later and was filled with a whole host of evidence, questions that Jemma did not answer. There are a great many surveillance cameras in modern London, and the fact that Jemma thought her journey with a heavy suitcase containing Deborah's body would go unnoticed did not work. Apparently, Jemma became more open during the interrogation and realized that she had no hope of justifying herself. Thus, during the first and subsequent interrogations, she remained silent, refusing to provide her version of events. Despite her refusal to cooperate with the investigation, the trial of Jemma Mitchell began a year later. On October 11, 2022, Jemma Mitchell not only denied killing Deborah but also refused to testify in her own defense. Her defense team claimed that there was no evidence to support the assertion that Deborah's body had been kept in the suitcase and that no evidence of a struggle was found in Deborah's house. Additionally, no weapon was discovered that could have separated the head from the body. But still, the motive for this crime was alleged to be money. The prosecution claimed that Jemma killed Deborah in order to forge a will and obtain money for home repairs. A notable level of heartlessness was revealed when it was noted that in the period between the murder and her trip with Deborah's body in the suitcase to Salcombe, Jemma went on a date with someone she had met on the internet at the London Zoo. It is worth noting once again that Jemma graduated with a first-class honors degree in the humanities, including a course in experimental anatomy, meaning she had the skills to remove a head from a body, although it is unclear why she did this. The deliberation, the jury delivered their verdict on October 27, 2022. Jemma Mitchell was formally found guilty of the murder of 67-year-old Mee Kuen Chong. Jemma's conviction made national headlines. During the sentencing phase of the trial, which was broadcast live on television, Jemma became the first convicted murderer in England and Wales to be sentenced live, as well as being the first woman in the UK to have her sentence filmed. The judge's words to Jemma were quoted as follows. He stated that she had left her residence early in the morning with a large suitcase that, as shown on surveillance camera, was either empty or contained very little. He mentioned that she took public transport to Deborah's residence and stayed there for more than 4 hours. The judge noted that the suitcase she brought home was now clearly full and heavy. He expressed no doubt that she had killed Deborah in her home and concluded that, considering she had not provided any explanation during her interrogations, she had gone to Mee Kuen Chong house that morning with the intent to kill. He remarked that she showed absolutely no remorse and seemed to completely deny what she had done. With the irrefutable evidence against her, the judge announced that Jemma Mitchell was sentenced to life in prison with a minimum term of 34 years, which meant that Jemma would not be eligible for parole until July 10, 2055. During Jemma's trial, a statement from Deborah's sister, who lived in Malaysia, was read to the court. In this statement, the sister wrote, "They still don't understand how she died. This secret will haunt she forever." Jemma never accepted responsibility for Deborah's murder, leaving many questions unanswered. However, for many, the motive appears clear and simple. Deborah was a vulnerable woman seeking help for her mental health problems. She confided in her friend Jemma, even offering her a significant amount of her savings to help with the house. But Jemma's actions constituted a vile and disgusting crime. Since Jemma's conviction, several of her former friends have come forward to share their own experiences with her, revealing that she had always tried to steal money, lured partners, and was a real snake. In the end, the case of Jemma Mitchell stands as a chilling reminder of how trust can be exploited in the most sinister ways. What began as a friendship rooted in shared faith and mutual support spiraled into a calculated act of betrayal, driven by greed and desperation. Deborah's tragic fate not only shattered the lives of those who knew her but also left an indelible mark on the UK's legal history, with Jemma's sentencing etched into public memory through its unprecedented live broadcast. As Jemma serves her life sentence, the unanswered questions surrounding Deborah's final moments linger, a haunting echo of a crime that stripped away a vulnerable woman's life and exposed the dark depths of human nature. Hello again, true crime fans. We've got another mysterious case to explore. The case of Dina Thompson. In the summer of 2022, the British media reported the release of one of the country's most dangerous criminals, 61-year-old Dina Thompson, known as the Black Widow. Today, I'll explain how she became infamous across the UK and why some people still fear her. Dina was born in 1960 in Hendon, a suburb of London. Her family was not poor, but barely made ends meet. Dina's father, a prison guard, was passionate about sports. He encouraged Dina to join a sports club, where she practiced gymnastics. He often participated in competitions and traveled abroad, often taking Dina with him. Dina grew up to be a cheerful and sociable girl, which made it easy for her to meet and connect with boys. After graduating from university, Dina found a job. In 1982, at the age of 22, she met a young man named Lee Wyatt on a date arranged by Lee's cousin. They felt a strong connection from the first meeting. 2 years later, in 1984, they married. After the wedding, They moved to Yapton, a small village in West Sussex, England, with a population of only 3,000. In Yapton, the Dana family welcomed a son, and Dina began working as a treasurer at a construction company. Meanwhile, Lee started a business selling designer stuffed toys, which they designed together. Their neighbors considered them a typical family. The neighbors did not have a close relationship with the Dina family. However, the attractive Dina often attracted the attention of local men. In 1991, the 31-year-old Dina met a local journalist named Julian Webb. He wrote articles about products sold in shops across West Sussex. Julian, 28, asked Dina to model clothes and display household items for money. She accepted his offer, and soon her picture appeared in the local newspapers. A month after Dina and Julian met, neighbors spotted them kissing near Julian's house. A few months later, Julian took Dina to his mother and expressed his desire to marry her. Julian's mother was surprised at how quickly things had progressed. She noted that Julian had met Dina in May, and by August, they were planning their wedding. Soon the whole village of Yapton knew about it. It was also known that Dina was still legally married to her first husband, Lee Wyatt. However, Lee had been missing for a long time at the time, and no one knew where he was. On the north coast of Cornwall, in the small resort town of Newquay, a young man named Colin Mitchell arrived and began looking for work at various entertainment venues. He was hired as a junior manager at an arcade. Colin provided his papers and explained that he had left West Sussex due to some problems. Initially, he appeared friendly and cheerful to everyone. However, it was soon realized that he was slightly deaf, which sometimes made communication difficult. As a result, the arcade staff often had to approach him and gently tap him on the shoulder to get his attention. It was soon realized that Colin Mitchell was his alias. His real name was Lee Wyatt. He explained that he had escaped trouble in West Sussex. Living with Dina in the village of Yapton, his wife was involved in toy manufacturing. Their most popular product was a leprechaun called Sean, who sold well both locally and outside the county. In the summer of 1991, Dina informed Lee that the Disney Corporation was interested in Sean the Leprechaun and was willing to pay $50 million for the rights to the character. Dina then informed Lee that the mafia had found out about their arrangement and was threatening to kill the entire family unless they handed over most of their money. Dina convinced him that he needed to flee immediately to protect his family. Lee obtained documents under the name Colin Mitchell and traveled to Cornwall County. The decision to flee may have saved his life. However, the real threat was not from the mafia, as there had never been any deal with Disney. Dina made up the story and convinced her husband that it was true. While on the run, he lived in an unfamiliar city under a false identity as a homeless person. He worked and sent most of his earnings to his son, continuing to support the family. On November 2, 1991, Dina used her money to marry her second husband, journalist Julian Webb. Lee was away and unaware of the situation. Julian was overjoyed to marry Dina, believing she was now his. However, a few months after the wedding, Dina informed Julian that she was terminally ill and that her company was pressuring her to resign. $26,000 had gone missing from the accounts of the companies where Dina worked as treasurer, prompting the police to focus their investigation on her. Dina claimed that her first husband, Lee Wyatt, was responsible for the theft. She alleged that he had stolen the money and gone into hiding, but that he had now returned to their village of Yapton and threatened her. Dina produced threatening letters from Lee and shared recordings of phone calls in which he spoke of seeking revenge. She also alleged that he had come to her home and assaulted her. However, there was no evidence to support this claim. Notably, a few months after Dina married Julian, Lee returned to Yapton when he learned of Dina's marriage. Lee created scandals involving Dina. The police believed Dina's accusations and began pursuing Lee, who went into hiding. The lies complicated Dina's life, and the lives of the men involved with her. Julian had given Dina $25,000 from his savings to treat a terminal illness that she claimed was the reason she had lost her job. However, as the money began to run out, Julian began asking Dana about her progress. To his surprise, Dina had no medical documents to prove that she was actually ill or receiving treatment. On 30 June 1994, Julian celebrated his 300th birthday at home with his wife, Dana. In the evening, Julian's mother called, but Dina answered the phone and said that Julian was feeling unwell and unable to talk. The mother suggested that Dina call a doctor, but Dina did not follow this advice. That night, Julian died. Forensic experts concluded that he had died from a drug overdose, but they were unable to determine whether his death was a result of criminal activity. Dina insisted that Julian had chosen to end his life. When police questioned the neighbors, they learned that there had been unusual activity involving the couple 2 to 4 days before the tragedy. Dina and Julian had been arguing loudly about money, which surprised their neighbors, as they were not used to hearing arguments in Dina's household. Julian was generally considered a positive and cheerful person. The day after Julian's tragic death, Dina went to his workplace to ask about receiving $35,000 from his insurance policy. However, it is reported that she never received the money. In addition, their marriage was considered invalid because Dina was still the legal wife of her first husband, Lee Wyatt. Dina insisted on having Julian's body cremated, but his mother strongly opposed the decision. At Julian's funeral, Dina wore a black leather miniskirt and a revealing black blouse, showing no sign of grief. After Julian's death, she turned her home into a meeting place for men. Although many men visited her, none stayed for more than a day. In 1997, Dina officially divorced her first husband, Lee Wyatt, and won her freedom. The following year, she met Richard Thompson. Shortly after meeting him, Dina confided that she was battling breast cancer. Richard, who supported her, gave her all of his savings and promised to make the rest of her life enjoyable. They traveled from England to Florida, where Richard had a lavish wedding ceremony at a luxury hotel with staff as witnesses. After the wedding, they moved to Brighton, East Sussex, on the south coast of England. Richard had always wanted to buy a boat and pursue a career in fishing. Dina encouraged him to take courses to start a yacht charter business for amateur fishermen, while Richard would take on the role of captain, helping beginners learn how to fish. 8 months after the wedding, Dina told her husband that she wanted to give him a special gift. On January 1, 2000, they decided to take a shower together. Dina then asked if she could tie Richard up, and he agreed. She tied him up, gagged him, and covered his face with a towel. Richard then waited, confused, for what he thought was a prank. Suddenly, Dina hit him with a baseball bat, followed by another blow. Fortunately, Richard freed his hands and lunged at her. At that point, Dina grabbed a knife and stabbed him in the shoulder. Only then was Richard able to grab Dina and subdue her. Richard reported the incident to the police. Dina accused her husband of assaulting her, claiming that she acted in self-defense. The next day, a real estate staff came to Richard's house, expecting to meet Dina to sell real estate. Richard was surprised when he opened the door. When he saw the agent, Richard realized what was going on. He suspected Dina had planned to kill him, sell the house, and disappear, knowing that since he was going to America, no one would look for him during the trial. Dina drained Richard's bank account by forging his signature. She also accumulated a large debt on his credit cards. In addition, they reported other victims, former lovers of Dana, including businessmen, teachers, prison guards, and even a convicted felon. All of these men claimed that Dana manipulated them, demanding money and pretending to be seriously ill. Dana asked for money from many men. While some gave her money willingly, others had their accounts secretly drained by Dana. The truth about her first husband, Lee, was revealed. In 1991, Dana stole money from her workplace, where she worked as a cashier. At the time, she produced threatening letters allegedly written by Lee and played recordings of phone calls in which he spoke of possible revenge. However, in 2000, it was revealed that the letters and recordings were made while Lee was preparing to escape from a mafia organization. Dina had convinced him to do so in order to make people think he had disappeared and abandoned her. Lee believed this would protect him and their son from threats from the mafia. In 2000, a jury acquitted Dina Thompson in a case involving an alleged assault on her third husband, Richard Thompson. The judge described Richard as a paranoid attention seeker. Although Dina was cleared of the felony charge, she was convicted of 15 other counts of financial fraud. She was sentenced to 3 years and 9 months in prison. A strange incident involving her husband, coupled with complaints about her from multiple lovers, led to an investigation into Dina and the death of her second husband, Julian Webb. Dina gave conflicting accounts of what happened to Julian. She told her mother that he had sunstroke after drinking too much on his birthday and fell asleep in the sun. However, Julian's mother did not believe this story, knowing that he had always been healthy and rarely drank. She often urged Julian to leave Dina. Dina claimed to investigators that Julian had taken his own life, but those who knew him found this hard to believe, as he was usually cheerful and rarely had conflicts with anyone. To a former co-worker, Dina mentioned that Julian died from a steroid overdose to maintain his healthy physique, but this was also false. A friend of Dina's revealed that she had hinted at poisoning her second husband, Julian, by secretly adding the drug to Julian's favorite spicy food. The police tracked down the owner of a small restaurant where Julian frequently ordered. They recalled that on the day Julian died, Dina had gone to the restaurant and ordered rice with curry in a takeout box. Police speculated that the strong flavor of the curry may have effectively masked the bitter taste of the medication. In October 2001, 7 years after Julian's death, the investigation into his death continued. Julian's body was exhumed and sent for a re-examination. New tests, unlike the original ones, found higher levels of the drug in his system. It was discovered that he had been poisoned with a large dose of antidepressants, which Dina had mixed into Julian's favorite dish, curry rice. In addition, she had added a large dose of aspirin to the drink he had with his meal. On his birthday, when Julian's mother called to congratulate him, he was lying in bed, almost unconscious. At that point, there was still a chance to save him. The trial of 43-year-old Dina Thompson took place in 2003. A senior police officer said she was the most dangerous woman he had ever met. The judge also noted that Dina was one of the best prolific liars he had ever seen. In 2003, Dina Thompson was convicted of murdering her second husband, Julian Webb. She was sentenced to life in prison with the possibility of parole after 16 years. Dina's crimes were reported on numerous television shows, crime magazines, and newspapers, earning her the nickname the Black Widow. In 2010, police began investigating the disappearance of Stoyan Kostov, one of Dana's first lovers from Bulgaria. Dina and Stoyan were in a relationship from the late 1970s to the early 1980s. During her childhood, Dina and her father traveled to competitions in various countries, including Bulgaria. During one of these trips, Dina met a young man and they quickly became close friends. Stoyan's family mentioned a number of strange incidents involving him and Dina. After their brief relationship, the young man mysteriously disappeared and was never found, dead or alive. It is suspected that Stoyan may have been one of Dina's first victims. While in prison, Dana attended rehabilitation courses and worked with a psychologist. In 2021, the police investigating her case expressed concern about her chances of being released, stating that she would commit another crime. Dana would not be able to stop, as she showed no remorse. However, during her time in prison, she was considered a model prisoner and always spoke positively. Dina Thompson, 61, was released from prison in the summer of 2022. Upon her release, she must notify the police of any romantic relationships she has had. She is also banned from contacting her ex-husbands and other men affected by her actions. Dina must also wear a tracking bracelet to monitor her movements, abide by a curfew, and provide details of her banking transactions if requested by the police. Richard Thompson, 63, who still lives in East Sussex, runs a property maintenance business. After learning of Dina's release, he expressed concern for his safety. Fully aware of what his ex-wife could do, he feared that his peaceful life was over. In July 2022, British newspapers published photos of Dina leaving a discount store carrying a large bag. Dina is now free to walk the streets of England. It is uncertain whether she has lured more victims or whether she has truly changed and chosen to live a better life. Hello again, true crime fans. We've got another mysterious case to explore. The case of Michelle O'Keefe. Michelle O'Keefe grew up in Hanford, California. Her parents, Michael and Patricia, were very proud of their 2 children. Michelle did well in school and pursued her dream of becoming an actress after graduating from high school. However, her bright future took a tragic turn in February 2000. On February 22, Michelle and her friend Jennifer traveled to Los Angeles to be extras in a music video. They arrived in separate cars and parked near a park. Michelle left her newly purchased blue Mustang and drove with Jennifer to Los Angeles. At 9:30 p.m., both girls returned to the park to pick up their cars and leave. Jennifer watched Michelle start the engine, turn on the headlights, and noticed that the taillights were on, indicating that Michelle was preparing to back up. As Jennifer drove down the street, she was surprised to see that the Mustang was not moving right behind her. Thinking that Michelle would soon catch up, Jennifer left the park and headed home. After that night, she would never see her friend again. That evening, a new security guard named Raymond Jennings, 25, began his shift at the park at 8:00 p.m. About an hour and a half into his shift, Raymond became alarmed and contacted his boss on the radio. He had heard an explosion coming from the west side of the parking lot, along with a car alarm. Raymond asked to call the police. Before the police arrived, they found a Ford Mustang parked in the center lane. The keys were still in the ignition, the engine and headlights were still on, and the manual transmission was in neutral. Inside the car, Michelle was sitting in the driver's seat. The deputy sheriff was the first to arrive on the scene. He determined that Michelle had died from her injuries. He also spoke with Raymond. When asked if he saw anyone leave the parking lot immediately after the explosion, Raymond replied that he did not see anyone get out after hearing the alarm and the explosion. Raymond then pointed to the shell casings, indicating that the bullets were found from the location of the Mustang. The driver's door was open, and the window was partially rolled down. A pair of black jeans was on the passenger seat. One of Michelle's shoes was on her right foot, while the other was on the ground. Police also found a gold earring on the ground. The Los Angeles County Sheriff's Office found that 5 shots were fired from the same 9mm gun. Police investigated, and there was no evidence that Michelle had any enemies. Her closest friends said she had no problems with her boyfriend and could not identify anyone who wanted to harm her. Police considered the possibility that Michelle was the victim of a robbery or attempted carjacking, especially since her cell phone was missing. The last call she made was to her friend Jennifer, just minutes before she got into the car. It is likely that the killer took her cell phone, but her wallet and $100 were still in the car, found between the center console and the driver's seat. Jennifer said, Michelle felt uncomfortable going to college that night in the outfit she wore in the music video because it was a little revealing. She planned to change her clothes before returning to campus. Raymond told police 3 times that he did not see anyone else in the parking lot at the time of the crime, making him the prime suspect. Raymond is a father of 5 and has served in the California National Guard. He was working toward becoming a U.S. Marshal. As a key witness in the murder investigation, Raymond was eager to assist. Police invited him to the station for interviews several times, which he gladly accepted. During the interviews, his statements seemed inconsistent and lacked credibility compared to what had already been established. Raymond said that when he arrived at the crime scene, Michelle was still alive. He claimed that her hands were moving or twitching, which made him think she was not dead. However, the medical examiner's findings contradicted Raymond's testimony. Michelle died instantly from her injuries. Police identified Raymond as the prime suspect, largely based on the belief that he was the only person present in the parking lot during the crime. 2 weeks after the murder, a woman named Victoria told police that she and 4 people in her car had witnessed the murder. At the time of the murder, Victoria was in the parking lot listening to loud music. She and her friends heard an explosion. Just before the explosion, Victoria noticed a security guard walking past her parked car toward Michelle. After hearing the explosion and the car alarm, she and her friends left the parking lot and found Michelle dead in the car. As they left, Victoria spoke to the security guard and asked him what had happened. He said that have heard gunshots, prompting the entire group to leave the parking lot. Police believe Raymond was the person seen near the Mustang at the time of the murder. Raymond later cooperated with the investigation, participating in an interview and agreeing to take a lie detector test, which he ultimately failed. At this point in the investigation, police believed they had identified the killer, but they lacked concrete evidence. The murder weapon had disappeared from the scene, and there was no physical evidence linking Raymond to the crime. Although Raymond legally owned a semi-automatic pistol, it was not the weapon used in the murder, stalling the investigation for years. During this time, Michelle's family hired a private investigator determined to find justice for Michelle. While the case was still under investigation, Raymond was deployed to Iraq. Upon his return 5 years later, he was arrested for Michelle's murder. Unable to post his $1 million bail, he remained in custody for nearly a year while the prosecution and defense prepared for trial. A devoted father of 5 and twice married, most of Raymond's family lived in North Carolina, but he had moved to California for better job opportunities. He considered himself a devout man and had helped a friend distribute Christian music CDs. Despite these qualities and his lack of criminal record, he was now charged with murder. During the trial, the defense pointed to the lack of forensic evidence linking Raymond to the crime. Raymond's DNA was not found in the car or on Michelle, and DNA found under her fingernails did not match his. There were no fingerprints, gun residue, or blood evidence linking Raymond. His car was searched for weapons, none were found. He resigned from his position as a park ranger shortly after the incident. While on patrol, he was approached by 2 men who threatened him and asked if he was the guard on duty the night of the murder, which made him feel unsafe and prompted him to resign. He returned his uniform, which was later turned over to the police by the security guard. However, the lab report found that the uniform was simply dirty and that Raymond had not even attempted to wash it before returning it. Importantly, the uniform showed no blood, gunpowder, or other physical evidence implicating Raymond in the shooting. Victoria testified that she had seen a security guard next to the Mustang in the parking lot. The prosecution exaggerated this testimony, claiming that Raymond had been at the scene of the murder just minutes before the shooting. After a week of deliberations, the jury was unable to reach a unanimous decision and announced that the trial would be retried. In February 2009, a second trial took place in California, but the jury again failed to reach a unanimous decision. This time, however, 11 jurors voted to convict, while only 1 juror dissented. Michelle's murder had been widely reported in the media for many years. Victoria was deemed ineligible to attend because she was serving time for other crimes, so her testimony was read in court. In December 2009, a third jury found Raymond Jennings guilty of second-degree murder. At the sentencing hearing, Michelle's family pleaded with the judge to impose the maximum sentence on the killer. Michelle's younger brother, who had confronted Raymond at his home after many years, urged him to take responsibility for his actions. Raymond responded by declaring his innocence. Raymond found peace in his life because he felt no guilt. He did not kill Michelle. Raymond was sentenced to 40 years in prison. Nearly 10 years into his sentence, Raymond still maintained his innocence, but his appeals had run out. He sought help from the state's Innocence Project, but progress was slow, and without new key evidence, it seemed unlikely that Raymond would be released for years. Raymond's situation improved when civil defense attorney Jeff Ehrlich took on Raymond's case in 2011. After reviewing all the evidence from 3 trials and police records, Jeff concluded that Raymond had been wrongly convicted. They acknowledged that the original investigation was flawed and decided to gather new evidence by consulting with their own experts. They submitted their findings to the newly formed Sentencing Review Unit. A key piece of evidence was the report that the lack of gunpowder residue on Raymond's jacket cuffs suggested he was not the killer. Ballistics evidence shows the 9mm weapon used to kill Michelle is similar to the weapon used by Bloods gang members in recent shootings. Victoria's social media posts suggest she was involved with the Bloods. In the years following Michelle's murder, Victoria had a history of violent crimes. She was arrested several times for assault with a weapon, one of which resulted in her boyfriend, Andrew, being convicted. At the time of Michelle's murder, Andrew was also a member of the Bloods. 4 months after the murder, he was involved in robberies, including the theft of a Ford Mustang. He used the same weapon used to kill Michelle. When Andrew was arrested in June 2000, he was wearing an earring that matched the description of an earring that belonged to Michelle that was missing from the crime scene. However, Andrew was never questioned about Michelle's murder, and the identities of the people in the SUV with Victoria were never determined. On January 23, 2017, a Los Angeles County Superior Court judge overturned Raymond's conviction, finding him innocent. He served 11 years. In March 2017, the state of California awarded him more than $538,000 in damages. Michelle's family was disappointed that the jury's verdict against Raymond could be easily overturned by a newly formed unit. However, the appeals court upheld the judge's decision. The family continues to struggle after losing Michelle. A few years later, they lost their son to a drug overdose. The couple is now divorced. They have suffered the loss of 2 children and also lost their only source of comfort, knowing that Michelle's killers are in prison. The investigation into her case continues. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today, we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Diana Garnica. On Saturday, May 6, 2017, a 17-year-old girl named Diana Garnica went out to meet her 40-year-old neighbor, Dario Suarez. As the day drew to a close, Diana did not return home. Her mother became concerned and tried to contact her, but was unable to reach her. After speaking with Dario, who gave no information about their encounter and claimed that he had not seen Diana that day, her mother became increasingly suspicious. Diana Garnica was born on March 30, 2000, in Argentina. Those who knew her, including friends and family, noted that she displayed maturity beyond her years. Diana was very responsible and enjoyed helping her family. A diligent student, she did well in school, but eventually had to drop out of school to help her family during the financial crisis. She made the difficult choice to drop out of school to find a job and help her parents. In addition, Diana has a boyfriend her own age. People also comment on her ability to protect herself. She knows how to keep her distance from rude or dangerous people. Diana is very friendly and is the second child in a family of 8 siblings. Later, her parents divorced, which was especially difficult for her, as she had deep feelings for her father. However, she maintained a close relationship with her mother. After the divorce, Diana's mother moved with all the children to a town in Alderates, Tucumán province. After settling into their new home, they got to know their closest neighbors, Dario Suarez and his family. Susana, Diana's mother, and her siblings formed a strong friendship with Dario's family, and they became so close that they treated each other like family. Susana often babysat Dario's children while they were away. Dario respected and loved Diana's family and treated her with great care, like his own sister. There was never any indication that Dario had inappropriate behavior towards Diana or her family, reflecting the deep trust and understanding between the two families. Diana went to work every morning and came home in the evening. Occasionally, she met members of her church community and spent time with her boyfriend and close friends. Unlike many girls her age, Diana did not like to dance and avoided discos and nightclubs. Those who knew her realized that she preferred to spend her free time at home. On May 6, 2017, Diana finished her work as usual and waited for her sister at the designated place so they could go home together, just like they did every day. When Diana got home, her neighbor Dario called her and asked if they could meet to buy an air conditioner as a surprise for his mother. He asked her to keep it a secret. However, after hanging up, Diana went to her mother's room and excitedly recounted the whole conversation, ignoring Dario's request to keep it a secret. She found it funny because it was still a long way from summer. In May, where she lived, the weather was quite cool and sometimes even cold. At that time, Diana did not suspect anything unusual and just told her mother that she would help Dario choose a gift. Diana had a very close relationship with her family and shared everything with them. On that unfortunate day, Dario sent Diana several text messages. He reminded her about the gift for her mother and emphasized that no one in her family should know about it, not her mother, father, siblings, or anyone else. Dario also asked Diana to keep their motorbike trip a secret. However, Diana read all of his messages but chose not to keep it a secret. She told her mother Susana everything. As a result, her mother was fully informed about the scheduled meeting between Diana and Dario. Diana left the house to wait for Dario at the bus stop. Hours passed, and finally, Dario returned home. Susana heard the sound of his motorbike and went out to check. Seeing Dario alone, she assumed that Diana had chosen to walk home alone. She thought that Dario's wife might be jealous. Therefore, Susana decided to wait a little longer, hoping that her daughter would come home soon. Time passed, and the girl still did not return. Worried, Susana went to see Dario to ask about Diana's whereabouts. Dario quickly claimed that he did not know where she was, saying that he had not seen her that day. This answer made Susana feel strange and suspicious because she knew that her daughter was supposed to meet Dario. Although he denied it, Dario offered to help by suggesting that he could use his motorbike to find Diana, assuming that she had just gone out for a walk. Diana's relatives called her several times, but soon realized that it was useless. She had left her phone at home while it was charging and could not answer any calls or messages. They decided to check her text message history and found every text message that Dario had sent to Diana that day. It was learned that Dario had asked Diana to help him buy a gift for his mother, which suggested that they had indeed met. One of Diana's brothers then decided to confront Dario about these messages, hoping to get him to admit that Diana was with him. When Dario noticed one of Diana's brothers approaching his house, he fled. Diana's father, who was divorced from her mother and lived on his own, learned of her disappearance and quickly arrived at the scene. The entire family then went to the police for assistance. At the police station, Diana's relatives explained in detail what had happened and showed several text messages that implicated Dario in their daughter's disappearance. For the family, Dario was the only suspect. However, the police dismissed their concerns and did not take their complaint seriously. Instead, they suggested that the family look for common gathering places for young people. Diana's parents were disappointed with the police response and insisted that if their daughter went anywhere, it was only between home and work, occasionally going to church. They believed that there were only a few places where she could have gone. In addition, the family was certain that on that day, she had met her neighbor Dario, but he had returned without her and had begun to avoid them. Despite this information, the police informed Diana's relatives that they could not file a missing person report because they did not have enough personnel and resources to search for her. They advised the family to go to another police station with patrols to begin the search immediately. However, as the family left the station feeling hopeless, they were surprised to see a patrol car parked at the entrance with 7 police officers nearby, relaxing and chatting. The problem was that they had the resources to conduct a search for the missing Diana, but they chose not to. Considering the situation, Diana's family decided to continue looking for Dario, who had tried to run away. They went to the brick factory where Dario was supposed to work. When Diana's father got out of the car, he noticed that Dario's entire family had gathered near the factory building for some unknown reason. This was unusual, especially since it was 2 a.m. on a Sunday morning. Inside the factory, the lights were still on and the kilns were still running, even though they had not been used for months. Diana's father asked Dario's family where he was. They replied that he had gone to the toilet. However, Diana's relatives soon discovered that Dario had actually gone deep into the mountains and had no intention of returning. Diana's family tried to talk to his wife and mother. Unfortunately, no one could provide any information about Dario's situation. Diana's family was suspicious and asked questions. Why was Dario's entire family at the factory that night if none of them knew what had happened? Why was the factory, which had been shut down for a long time, suddenly operating early on a Sunday morning? Frustrated, Diana's family approached the judiciary and tried to file a complaint with the prosecutor's office. They expressed their concerns by going to the police the day before, and the police assured them that information about Diana's disappearance would be passed on to the prosecutor's office. However, when they arrived, no one at the office knew about the situation, possibly because no official statement had been filed. As a result, the family had to start the complaint process all over again. After filing a new complaint, Prosecutor Claudio Bonari went to the scene of the incident. Claudio instinctively sensed that something was amiss, so he quickly began organizing searches. He started at the home of the suspect, Dario Suarez, and then moved to the brick factory where Dario worked. The prosecutor discovered that the factory's kiln had been operating the night before, which raised some disturbing thoughts. Claudio later reported that he faced unexpected challenges during the investigation that day. The judges from the investigative court and his office secretary were not present, which prevented them from issuing a search warrant in time. Prosecutor Claudio therefore decided to conduct searches without the necessary warrant. He began his investigation by searching Dario's home and the factory. The prosecutor's main theory was that Dario might have kidnapped Diana and assaulted her. According to this theory, the factory could be the crime scene where Dario dumped the body. However, the prosecutor also considered the possibility that Dario did not act alone. He suspected that other people, including Dario's wife, mother, factory owner, and employees who were present that night, might have been involved in the crime. A second investigation was launched. The theory was that Diana might have been kidnapped and possibly handed over to the mafia or human traffickers. This theory did not come about by accident. In fact, in Diana's family, it was discovered that Dario was involved with very dangerous people who kidnapped young girls to then sell them or transfer them to bars and nightclubs. A girl on Facebook claimed that a man named Christian had handed Diana over to a human trafficking group. She detailed on her personal page how Diana was put in a nice car and mentioned an envelope of money that was supposed to be for Christian. However, This so-called witness later confessed that she had lied to blame her ex-boyfriend for everything after he left her. This situation required the prosecutors and their team to thoroughly review the documents they had for the investigation. As a result, significant resources were wasted on this false lead, hindering the actual investigation. Meanwhile, Prosecutor Claudio chose to pursue the case under the hypothesis of illegal detention and possible murder. His main theory was supported by the efforts of sniffer dogs who searched the area, as well as firefighters from Punta Arena, who assisted in the police-led searches and raids. The dogs repeatedly followed Diana's scent, leading them in the same direction. This gave them a clear path that she would have taken that day. The path started from Diana's house, then to Dario's house, and continued from there to the brick factory. The police therefore focused their search on both Dario's house and the factory. At the factory, the dogs discovered a pendant with the letter D and a belt with traces of blood. During a search of the homes of Dario and his relatives, police confiscated their cell phones and examined their text message histories. A manuscript discovered at Dario's home confirmed that his relatives were involved in covering up the crime. Regarding the brick factory, the prosecutor conducted 3 searches there, believing that the final crucial evidence would be discovered to clarify what happened on May 6. Claudio was convinced that all the answers would be found at the site. Therefore, on May 13, the police, together with forensic experts, returned to the factory for the 3rd time in a week to re-examine the furnace that had attracted the dogs' attention. In the furnace, they found the remains of teeth and a piece of surgical steel. A month later, on June 18, Prosecutor Claudio informed the parties concerned of some disturbing news. The evidence found at the brick factory had mysteriously disappeared. As a result, the prosecutor declared the case secret, which meant that neither the parties concerned nor the media would receive any further updates. An internal investigation was launched involving 10 police officers. 7 were released while 3 faced charges. The case has been investigated in secret since then. There was speculation that the envelopes containing the evidence may have been damaged, leading to the loss of evidence. However, Prosecutor Claudio and Diana's family were not convinced by this explanation. They believed that those involved in their daughter's disappearance were powerful and dangerous people who could manipulate the situation to hide any information. Dario later turned himself in to the police. What was most surprising was that Dario arrived with a highly paid and clearly financially beyond his means private attorney. This was no ordinary attorney. He was a top specialist, often hired by the wealthy and influential. He was not a public defender, but someone with a proven track record of successfully defending clients involved in questionable activities. Dario arrived with this attorney, much to Diana's family's surprise. Everyone knew that Dario could not afford such legal representation. In fact, Diana's parents had struggled to raise enough money to hire an attorney to help investigate their daughter's case. Dario's ability to hire such an expensive attorney raised suspicions about his involvement in a serious situation and showed that he had connections with powerful people. Dario's lawyer ordered him to exercise his right to silence and confirm only what had already been proven by the accusing party. In particular, the text messages that he exchanged with Diana on the day of her disappearance. The lawyer also instructed that the initial evidence gathered by Prosecutor Claudio be dismissed, as the searches had been conducted without proper authorization. Of the 12 people initially suspected and detained in connection with the case, all were eventually released, leaving only Dario in custody. As there was no further evidence linking him to the crime beyond what had already been gathered, the police were unable to make any progress in solving the case or bring further charges. As a result, the investigation stalled and Dario was eventually released on bail. In January 2018, after a series of disturbing events, Diana's sister was attacked by a woman. Diana's sister reported the incident to the police, who refused to accept her complaint. Like the initial complaint against Diana, this one failed to attract the attention of the police. Soon after, more puzzling events took place. Diana's family received small sums of cash from unidentified people on 3 separate occasions, accompanied by notes that appeared to have been written by Diana. These messages gave the family hope that she was still alive. One note read, "Mom, I'm Diana. I'm alive. They're holding me. Please come get me." Another message conveyed a similar plea. 3 banknotes were sent to a lab for analysis. 2 of them tested negative, showing that the handwriting did not match the notes in Diana's notebook. The 3rd banknote initially tested positive, showing that it matched Diana's handwriting. However, when retested, the results were negative, indicating that the handwriting was not hers. This case is indeed full of inexplicable details. First, the evidence found disappeared. Then these notes appeared. The identity of the handwriting remains unknown. The discovery of these notes has rekindled the family's hope for their daughter's return and led them to form new theories about her possible location. Diana's parents still believe she is alive, while they feel the police are unwilling to pursue her case. In May 2019, 2 years after Dario Suarez was arrested for a crime he was suspected of but had no evidence to prove, Dario was released under the Argentine Penal Code. 2 years and 4 months after Diana went missing, the federal court decided to close her case due to insufficient evidence. Currently, the main theory of the prosecution is that Diana was kidnapped and is likely the victim of violence and murder. Throughout the investigation and searches were carried out at various locations, and many witnesses were interviewed, but no one provided clear information about what happened. Hello, crime enthusiasts! Are you ready for another chilling investigation? The case of Benno Numer. In today's story, we focus on the Numer family, who live in Balna, a city in northern Italy. The family consists of parents Peter Numer and Laura Perselli. Their son Benno is 30 years old, and their daughter Maid is 27 years old. Benno is a doctor who has completed his university education and is dedicated to fitness. His father, Peter, is 63 years old, and his mother, Laura, is 68 years old, both retired from teaching at school. Despite their age, they are still active in social and cultural activities. The family is respected in the community. On January 4, 2021, Laura and Peter suddenly disappeared. They were last seen that morning when they went to the supermarket. Laura was planning to visit her mother, who had just returned home from the hospital. Laura rode her bike to her mother's house. A few hours later, Laura's sister sent her a short video of their sick mother, but Laura never opened the message. At the same time, Laura's daughter Maid was on vacation with a friend outside the city and sent her mother a photo but received no response. Benno called his mother at 8:30 that evening, but she did not answer. 3 minutes later, he sent a voice message to his girlfriend, Martina, expressing his concern that he had not been able to reach his parents. He told her that he would be at her house in about an hour or 2 for dinner as planned, and that he would be late. Benno asked her to call him back later on a regular phone line instead of WhatsApp because he did not have an internet connection. Martina called him back shortly afterwards, and they arranged to meet at 10:12 p.m. When Benno arrived at her house in his father's car, he said he had forgotten to shower. He went to wash his face and asked Martina if she could do his laundry. She didn't ask any questions and agreed to help. Benno gave Martina a bag full of dirty clothes. She didn't check the contents and threw them in the washing machine. The couple then had a great evening at the bar and a passionate night at her house. Benno didn't leave his girlfriend's house until 5:30 a.m., When he was with her at around 11 p.m., he sent his mother a short text message wishing her a good night. He noticed that she hadn't read it, but he was too busy that evening to think about it. Early in the morning of January 5, Laura's sister came to her house. She knocked on the door and rang the bell, but there was no response. It was clear that no one was home. Laura's sister was worried and called Benno to ask about Laura and Peter. However, Benno said he was not home and did not know where they were. Laura's sister was busy taking care of her sick mother and could not leave her alone, so she asked Benno to try to find them. Benno promised to help and suggested that their parents might have gone to the mountains, as they often did. He advised them to wait a few days. Meanwhile, Laura's daughter, Maid, was at the resort with her friend and boyfriend. She noticed that her messages had been ignored, which made her suspicious. She called her dad and was surprised when he didn't answer. His social media pages also showed unread messages, and she couldn't reach her parents, which made her even more worried. So Maid called her brother Benno, who said he was walking his dog in the mountains a few kilometers away from their parents' house, and he couldn't check on them. He seemed worried throughout the call, and his story sounded strange. The dog was very old and sick, barely moving even in their yard, so it was hard to believe he could hike several kilometers into the mountains with the dog. Unable to get more information from Benno, Maid decided to ask a neighbor who lived next door to her parents for help around 1:30 p.m. The neighbor was home, so she agreed to check on her parents. The neighbor knocked on the door, and Benno opened it. At that time, the neighbor was still on the phone with Maid. She immediately recognized her brother's voice and was surprised that he had just refused her request to check on her parents. Benno explained that he had rushed back to his parents' house after walking the dog and was now home. Benno said that their parents were not home and insisted that he did not know where they had gone. Maid called all the hospitals in the city because she had a strong feeling that something was wrong with her parents. Eventually, Maid stopped her outing and returned home. She asked Benno if he knew what had happened to their parents, but he said he did not know. He explained that he had spent the previous day with his girlfriend and had only returned home in the morning when their parents were no longer there. Feeling desperate, Maid decided to contact the police to report her parents missing. At this point, Benno began to discourage her from calling the police. He seemed to be stalling for time, but he suggested another approach that he thought would be more effective. So he contacted a friend who was a police officer for advice on how to handle the situation. Benno's friend suggested contacting a search and rescue service that specialized in mountain rescue, but that didn't help either. In the end, May decided to go to the police himself, regardless of whether Benno supported her decision or not. He eventually agreed, and they went to the police station together. The young man told them about his parents' disappearance and suggested that they might have gone into the mountains. He mentioned that an avalanche had occurred in the area they frequented, about a day after they left. He believed that his mother and father might have been buried under the snow. This explanation seemed plausible to the police and became the main focus of the investigation. Laura and Peter were declared missing, and search teams were deployed to the site of the avalanche. Trained dogs were used to search. Despite a thorough search, it took a long time to cover the entire area. The police decided to interview Benno to gather more information. They noticed that he was evasive and increasingly uncomfortable when asked difficult questions, making his behavior seem suspicious. After leaving the office, Benno suddenly displayed a sudden and inexplicable aggression. He attributed this outburst to hunger, fatigue, and stress. The next day, there was still no news from the police about Peter and Laura, prompting Maid to return to the station. Benno tried to stop her again, insisting that the police needed more time to conduct the search. During this time, another girl named Jasmine contacted Benno. It turned out he was chatting with 3 other people on Tinder, and he was particularly interested in Jasmine, and he showed little interest in the ongoing investigation. On January 6, Maid returned to the police station. It had been 2 days since her parents had gone missing. Laura and Peter had not contacted her, which made her believe that something had happened to her parents. They usually informed her before they went into the mountains and would prepare carefully for such trips. She felt the need to conduct a more thorough search of the area near their home. The police were actively involved from the beginning. Initially, they focused on the possibility that the couple had gone missing in the mountains. During this time, Benno went to the supermarket with his new girlfriend, Jasmine, where he bought a large amount of hydrogen peroxide, explaining that he needed it to prepare to sell his father's car. Search teams along with volunteers were organized to search the areas outside the mountains and around Laura. Despite the large resources and the participation of about 600 people in the search effort, Peter and Laura were still missing. Everyone worked together in the hope of finding them quickly. Finally, Maid expressed her concerns. She thought about Benno's strange behavior and the fact that their parents had disappeared shortly after she left the city for a short time. During that time, Benno was supposed to be with them, and their relationship was complicated. She suspected that he might know more than he was letting on. The police decided to question Benno again. This time, during questioning, he was overly friendly, which was surprising given his violent reaction after his previous encounter with the police. The officers suspected that he was deliberately controlling his demeanor to avoid revealing any important information. During this time, suspicions grew that Peter and Laura were likely dead, and it was believed that the couple's son, Benno, might be involved. Benno became the prime suspect. Maid regularly contacted the police, sharing information about Benno and their parents. Benno's behavior was often so rude and aggressive that Laura was afraid to be home alone with him. On January 7, the police tracked Benno down. That day, Jasmine and Benno got into the family car and went to a hardware store where they bought rags, cleaning supplies, a bucket, and hydrogen peroxide. While Benno asked Jasmine to pay for the items, they stopped at a car wash before heading home. The police arrested them there and found all the items they had purchased in the trunk of the car. The car was impounded for further investigation. The police also attempted to confiscate Benno's jacket, but he refused to hand it over. Benno was questioned again that day. Ultimately, he did not provide any useful information, and since there was no evidence against him, he was released. Although the police confiscated the cleaning kit, Benno and Jasmine decided to clean the house. Benno asked her to wear the jacket the police had asked to confiscate. She did not suspect anything and agreed. After a short while, he took the jacket off Jasmine and put it away. Later that day, the police arrested Jasmine, thinking she might be involved in the case. They questioned her for hours about Peter and Laura's disappearance, but could not find any evidence to link her to the crime. Jasmine is later confronted by the Carabinieri police several times during interrogation, including when Benno's jacket is confiscated. Her hair and skin particles are found on the jacket, forcing her to prove her innocence. She explains that she helped Benno clean the house and wore the jacket, but she was unaware of the implications and risk of harm to herself. On January 17, Maid returns to her parents' house and finds Benno there. She decides to voice her suspicions, which leads to an altercation between them. Maid suggests that Benno may be involved in Peter and Laura's disappearance. He becomes hysterical, shaking as he tries to convince her that she is mistaken. He eventually swears that he had nothing to do with it. Despite his assurances, she remains suspicious of Benno, knowing he is a good liar. Benno tries to justify his actions. However, Maid knew about his troubled relationship with their parents and his aggressive nature. He was the only one capable of causing harm to their loved ones. On January 18, Benno was the prime suspect in the case. The police suspected that he had killed his parents and then hidden their bodies. But the police lacked solid evidence. They only found a small blood stain on the car, not enough to confirm the death of his parents. However, the investigation continued. Important information came to light when Benno's phone was confiscated and examined. Geolocation data from the phone was examined on the evening when Peter and Laura went missing. The data showed that Benno had left the city and stopped near the bridge on the Adige River, where he stayed for a considerable amount of time. The police believed that he may have dumped their bodies there. This location became the focus of the search for evidence. On February 6, 2021, a search operation was launched in the Adige River. Police quickly located Laura's body. However, her husband, Peter, had been missing for more than 3 months. He was finally found on April 27, after Laura's body was discovered on the riverbank. A brown stain that looked like blood was found on the bridge over the river. Forensic experts analyzed the sample and confirmed that it was Peter's blood. Surveillance camera footage captured Benno's car on the evening of the incident as he returned from the bridge to his ex-girlfriend Martina's house, confirming that he was at the scene where the bodies were found. Peter's body was found by forensic experts in relatively good condition. A layer of algae had formed on it, slowing down decomposition, and the cold temperature helped preserve the tissues. This made it easy to spot signs of strangulation on both Peter and his wife. Marks on their necks indicated that they had been attacked from behind. The cause of death was confirmed to be strangulation, and it was determined that they had been thrown into the river after they were dead, as there was no water in their lungs. Given Benno's strong and muscular physique, he was able to overpower his elderly parents without much difficulty. After his parents' bodies were found, Benno admitted that he was involved in their deaths. On the night of the incident, he had an argument with Peter. Benno tried to avoid the argument by locking himself in his room, but his father barged in and continued the argument. In a fit of rage, Benno attacked his father with a rope and strangled him. When Laura heard the noise and went upstairs, he feared that she would call the police, so he strangled her as well. Although his confession seemed credible, his motives seemed too weak to justify such a brutal act. Benno explained that his relationship with his parents had become increasingly strained in the months leading up to the incident. Marked by frequent arguments after he moved back in with them, Benno had begun paying rent at his father's request. However, due to the constant arguments, his father decided that it would be best if Benno moved out. He began to encourage his son to rent his own apartment, but Benno refused. To pressure him to move, his father increased the rent to €700, which Benno considered excessive and unfair. That evening, Peter called him a loser for spending too much time on the computer and forced him to walk the dog. Another argument broke out. This conflict escalated into a tragic situation. Benno claims that his father was the first to confront him, trying to kick him out of the house. As a result, Benno felt he had no choice but to defend himself. The investigation revealed that immediately after the murder, Benno began to create an alibi. He called his mother's cell phone, pretending to go looking for her. After the murder, he asked Martina to wash his clothes to erase any evidence. Although she handed the washed clothes over to the police, no incriminating marks were found on them. Police believe that his efforts to conceal the evidence indicate a deliberate act. Not only did Benno understand what he was doing, but he also tried to avoid consequences for this brutal crime. Benno attempted to explain his actions by claiming that he was mentally disturbed and affected by the attack. However, his calm demeanor and careful efforts to conceal evidence of the crime showed that he was fully aware of his actions. After his arrest, psychiatrists evaluated him and determined that he had a personality disorder characterized by narcissism and social problems. He had recently had frequent sudden outbursts of anger, which doctors attributed to his steroid use. Benno began taking additional medication. This led to a significant deterioration in his mental state due to hormonal changes, leading to increased aggression and a complete loss of self-control. Maid said that he would often attack her when angry and was often violent with other family members. On one occasion, she suffered multiple bruises as a result of his aggression. Even as a child, Benno tried to strangle her, but their parents were present at the time. In 2020, Benno entered a relationship with a girl named Nadine, and they moved to Germany together. A friend noted that at first, Benno was very attentive and caring. However, over time, his behavior became controlling, showing signs of selfishness and abusive tendencies. He tried to create distance between Nadine and her family, isolating her from her parents and friends, leaving her to spend most of her time alone. Things got worse when in June 2020, Nadine discovered that Benno had used her credit card without permission and stolen money from her account. This betrayal prompted Nadine to end the relationship. She called Benno's parents and insisted that they pick up their son from her apartment. His parents had to drive to pick him up. Just a day after their return, Benno made amends with Nadine, promising to pay her back and asking her parents to let him go home to Nadine. While Nadine was at work, he sent her a selfie showing him covered in blood. Benno claimed he had gotten into a fight with a friend named Dean. However, Dean was in another part of town at the time and did not see Benno. Benno sent some of the photos to his mother, Laura, who was concerned. She contacted a friend for advice. The friend suggested that Benno could be dangerous and advised Laura not to go to his apartment alone. Laura suspected that Benno's mental health had deteriorated due to his use of anabolic steroids. Benno was eventually taken away, and it was discovered that he had been self-harming due to hallucinations. After this incident, Nadine decided not to see him again, but he was discharged after only 3 days. During his stay, doctors did not have enough time to carry out all the necessary tests to diagnose his condition. It was suspected that Benno was schizophrenic and his family insisted on further testing, but he refused and began taking medication for schizophrenia. By the time Benno's trial began, he had been diagnosed with acute polymorphic psychotic disorder rather than schizophrenia. This misdiagnosis meant that he was taking the wrong medication, which likely worsened his mental condition. While on steroids, he was taking a dangerous cocktail of drugs that affected his behavior. Immediately before the murder, Benno was released from the psychiatric hospital and returned home. During this time, his mother became extremely concerned for his safety. She hid all the knives in the house and locked the doors at night. She believed that as long as she did not provoke him, everything would be fine, so she tried to avoid arguments and limit her interactions with him. Unfortunately, this did not protect her from a tragic end. On November 19, 2022, Benno Numer was sentenced to life in prison. However, his lawyer quickly appealed the decision, arguing that Benno was insane due to a combination of negative factors that worsened his mental condition. To support the defense's claims, several independent medical assessments were conducted, which found him mentally stable. The prosecution pointed out that Benno acted deliberately, as he tried to create an alibi and conceal his actions. Just minutes after the murder, he called his girlfriend, pretending to be worried about his parents' absence. He ruthlessly deceived those around him, sending messages to his deceased mother, deceiving his sister and neighbors, all to escape justice. After the retrial, Benno's life sentence was upheld and remains in effect. The murders of Peter and Laura received considerable media attention in Italy and caused widespread public fear. Welcome back to our channel. Today we will explore a new case. The case of Cynthia George. On an afternoon on June 16, 2001, an attack at a gas station in Akron, Ohio, shattered the peaceful atmosphere and claimed the life of a successful businessman once admired by the upper class. Ed George and Cynthia George were famous residents and were considered the wealthiest in the state of Agaya, USA. Ed was a successful Lebanese businessman who owned a banquet hall and a nightclub. He was one of 8 children in a Lebanese Catholic family. After completing his education at the University of Michigan, he joined the family business founded by his father, Edwin George, in 1948. Although the original building was destroyed by fire, Ed rebuilt it and expanded the venue to include an entertainment center for events. During its peak, the establishment hosted renowned musical acts. Cynthia George, Ed's wife, was a charming and attractive socialite, known for her petite frame, blonde hair, and striking blue eyes. They had 7 children together. Cynthia grew up in North Canton in a low-income family. Her father worked as a miner, and her mother took care of the home and children. Lacking exposure to wealth, Cynthia began working at a young age. Although she couldn't afford higher education, she quickly realized that her looks could provide her with a path to a more comfortable life, leading her to pursue a career as a dancer. At this time, Cynthia, a 20-year-old, attended a nightclub casting call in 1978, managed by Ed, who was 15 years her senior. Although she didn't get the job, she caught Ed's attention, and they began dating. He seemed to be a convinced Catholic and was in no hurry to get married. However, after 6 years together, they got married in a lavish ceremony, attended by over 500 guests. This marriage fulfilled Cynthia's dream of a luxurious lifestyle. Cynthia and Ed moved into a spacious mansion with 5 bedrooms and 5 bathrooms. First of all, they wanted children, and over the next few years, Cynthia gave birth to 4 daughters. Ed felt this wasn't enough, so they adopted 2 boys. In 1994, at the age of 40, Cynthia became pregnant again and had another girl. The family comfortably managed their large household with the help of servants and a steady income from an upscale restaurant at the club. Despite his busy work schedule, Ed always made time for his children. He would comb his daughter's hair every morning, assist with their homework in the evenings. Being a person with a healthy lifestyle, he is never absent from any sporting event. Meanwhile, Cynthia relies heavily on nannies to take care of her children and enjoys a leisurely life of partying and shopping. Her husband supported this lifestyle, giving her plenty of freedom. While his substantial wealth, Cynthia often complained about receiving too little money, even though she indulged in whatever she wanted. In fact, Cynthia turned out to be not such a decent woman as she initially seemed. From the first years of marriage, she had lovers that her husband did not suspect. She flirted and met different men right in his club. One of her main lovers was Jeff Zach, a tall and charming man known for his appeal to women. He had Israeli roots. By 1976, he dropped out of school and decided to move to his homeland to study his Jewish origins. He became a citizen of Israel and even served in the army as a paratrooper. Jeff was multilingual and claimed to be a special agent involved in real combat operations. After 3 years, he returned to the United States. At 29, he met a beautiful brunette named Bonnie Cook in an Arizona restaurant. They quickly fell in love, decided to solidify their union by marriage, and then have children. During this time, Bonnie discovered a different side of her husband. She noticed that Jeff seemed to have 2 contrasting personalities. One was calm and gentle, while the other was aggressive and cruel. These personalities appear unpredictably. 2 years after their wedding, they welcomed a son. During this period, Jeff attempted to start a new business. He had many different startup ideas, but none were successful. They managed to make ends meet and moved into a comfortable 2-story house in the small town of Stowe, Agaya. Here, Jeff began a business involving vending machines. Although he became somewhat calmer over time, he still frequently experienced angry outbursts. His violent nature even led to several legal issues. Shortly after moving in one evening, Bonnie and Jeff were dining at Ed's club when Bonnie noticed her husband staring intently at a beautiful stranger. During dinner, Jeff even complimented the blonde multiple times, which greatly upset Bonnie. This attractive woman was Cynthia. That night, Jeff also met Ed, the owner of the club, and realized that building a friendship with him could significantly benefit his business. He spent the rest of the evening socializing with Ed and his wife, leaving Bonnie alone at the table. Jeff and Ed quickly hit it off and began a friendship. Eventually, Bonnie and Cynthia also grew close, regularly visiting each other's families and celebrating holidays together. Ed invested in Jeff's business by purchasing 100 vending machines and connecting him with valuable partnerships. This investment allowed Jeff to place machines in prime locations throughout the city, leading to the success of his business. Despite the rapid development of the business, soon, Bonnie became the main breadwinner of the family. Her career as a real estate agent was thriving. During this time, Jeff retired a little from business Respawn and spent more time with their son. The boy helped service vending machines, buy products for them, and carry out scheduled repairs. Jeff also started attending his son's training sessions and sporting events. Despite the fact that the life of both families seemed ideal from the outside, problems continued inside. Cynthia, who was 40 years old at the time, struggled with depression. Her friends encouraged her to participate in a local beauty contest in Agaya in 2000, specifically for married women over 21. Although Cynthia met the age requirement, she would be competing against younger women, many nearly half her age. Despite this challenge, she was determined and motivated. Winning the contest could allow her to represent her state at the national level and potentially advance to international competitions. The prizes included gold jewelry and complimentary beauty salon appointments. Cynthia was motivated by a desire to win and prove that she was the most beautiful in the city and the state. Her main goal was to gain influence. To prepare for the beauty contest, she tightened her diet and increased her training. Ultimately, Cynthia placed third in the competition. Despite her disappointment, she held her head high and smiled when the winner was announced. Competing at 40 years old as a mother of 7 against 20-year-olds was a significant achievement in itself. Even though she didn't win first place, her popularity grew. On June 16, 2001, multiple calls came into the police station near a gas station reporting an attack on the driver of a Ford SUV vehicle. 2 witnesses heard an explosion and saw a man, injured in the head, still alive, but struggling to breathe. Fortunately, a nearby nurse intervened, with help from another bystander, to pull the victim out of the car and provide first aid. They called emergency services and managed to keep the driver alive until paramedics arrived. The man was rushed to a medical center, where doctors did everything they could to save him. However, he tragically died just minutes after arrival. Law enforcement quickly secured the area and the vehicle. The driver's side window was shattered. The bullet entered through the cheek and exited the other side of the skull, breaking the passenger window. The deformed bullet was later discovered on the street near the car, while the cartridge case was found approximately 100 meters away from the parking lot. Witnesses, including a gas station employee, Carolyn Hyson, saw the victim arrive just before the attack. Shortly after, a motorcyclist pulled up, calmly approached the driver's side window, and attacked with weapons. Carolyn had a clear view of the criminal as he looked directly at her before he got on his motorcycle and rode away. He was a stocky man with dark hair, dressed entirely in black, resembling Ghost Rider, which seemed unusual for a summer day. However, he was wearing a helmet, so she couldn't see his face. Meanwhile, she was able to provide a detailed description of the motorcycle. It was a Street Fighter model, black and gray with neon green lights. She recalled that this distinctive man had been seen riding back and forth on the street multiple times, as if he was deliberately waiting for his target. After Carolyn reported the case at work, 2 managers ran out to the car. They were the ones who provided first aid and called an ambulance. The police quickly accessed the gas station's surveillance footage, but unfortunately, the quality was too poor to identify the attacker. They could see the motorcycle, but not its license plate. Detectives began investigating the identity of the murdered man to compile a list of potential suspects. To their surprise, they discovered that many people had negative opinions about him. Jeff was known to be difficult, hot-tempered, and often argued with neighbors over trivial matters. The investigation found that Jeff had several problematic business relationships and was involved with married women. He also had a criminal record. In 1981, he was convicted for running an illegal escort agency in Arizona. At the store where he frequently purchased supplies for his machines, people spoke poorly of him. He was notorious for flirting with attractive female employees, many of whom were schoolgirls working part-time. One witness recounted an incident involving a 17-year-old girl whom Jeff harassed to obtain her phone number. After she reluctantly provided it, he began calling her incessantly, offering money for intimate. This harassment continued until the girl's father intervened, threatening Jeff with legal action for corrupting a minor. There were other similar incidents, which contributed to his tarnished reputation. Detectives were aware of many individuals who might seek revenge against him. When the police arrived at Jeff's family's home to inform his wife about the incident, she was shocked and started to cry. They had been married for 15 years. Although she couldn't believe what had happened, she didn't appear especially surprised given her husband's controversial reputation and the many people who disliked him. Bonnie recounted the events of the day her husband was killed. That morning, Jeff was at home with his wife and son. He needed to go on his usual trip to check on the machines and restock them. Jeff asked his son for help, but the boy, upset with his father, refused. This prompted an argument between them, which Bonnie mentioned was a common occurrence. She herself was tired of the behavior of her husband, who treated her frankly badly. She admitted that she was thinking about divorce. Fortunately the teenager refused to help his father. It is possible that this saved his life. Typically, when disagreements arose, Jeff would react aggressively towards his son. During one instance, he attempted to involve Bonnie in an unpleasant discussion, but she chose to ignore him. He then claimed to have found a new woman who was superior to Bonnie in every way. She recognized this as another attempt to provoke her and continued to disregard his comment. To back up his claim, Jeff left the house, stating he was going to see his mistress. However, in reality, he went to wholesale warehouses to purchase items for vending machines. For several hours, he was in stores arranging merchandise, with this confirmed by witnesses and surveillance footage. The trips ended with a stop near a gas station where the killer acted quickly. There was reason to believe that Jeff was a big fan of lying. He frequently confided in a friend for the most intimate things. The police interviewed this friend, and he confirmed that Jeff tended to exaggerate his past to fit in with wealthier social circles. They also spoke with the victim's son. He supported his mother's account of a conflict with his father that morning. He struggled with mixed emotions regarding his parents. He loved his father, as they had grown closer recently. However, he was deeply troubled by his father's treatment of his mother, having witnessed years of emotional abuse and infidelity. The schoolboy really wanted to help find the killer. The numerous betrayals of Jeff seemed like a valuable clue. In addition, shortly before the massacre, Jeff deceived the contractors who were doing construction work. He paid them only about $7,000, less than the initial agreement, under a far-fetched pretext. However, these builders had a confirmed alibi. Bonnie stated that she didn't have specific suspicions about the killer, but she described Jeff as having a nasty and aggressive personality, which could lead him into trouble at any moment. She mentioned that he frequently received threatening messages and calls. One of the strange messages was saved on the answering machine, and she showed it to the police. It was received on Wednesday, June 13, at 2:55 p.m. from a man. According to Bonnie, when Jeff listened to the message, he became visibly agitated. Previously, he had taken such calls lightly, sometimes even joking about them, but this time he became restless and started pacing the room, deep in thought. Bonnie didn't know who the caller was, but she felt the voice on the recording sounded menacing. After the conversation, he said goodbye and mentioned they would speak again soon. Bonnie revealed that her husband left and went into hiding for several days after the call. He only returned home on Saturday morning, just before his death, and was in a very bad mood. The police interviewed all of Jeff's relatives and friends. Even his parents described Jeff as a swindler and a manipulator, someone unreliable, often distracted, who could also be involved in mischief and intimidation. During their investigation, officials discovered light illegal substances in Jeff's pockets, pointing to another area of inquiry. It seemed Jeff had connections to the criminal underworld, or perhaps he owed someone money, and this became the reason for the massacre. However, this line of investigation also led to no new findings. A forensic expert established more details surrounding the cause of death. The bullet entered through the right ear, damaging the oral cavity and causing severe bleeding. Within minutes, his lungs filled with blood, leading to choking. The wound itself turned out to be non-fatal. After talking to people involved with Jeff, the detectives eventually contacted the George, who had a close relationship with Jeff. They discovered that Cynthia was one of Jeff's mistresses, and their affair had lasted nearly a decade. This revelation drew significant attention during the investigation. The investigators also was revealed that Cynthia had a history of infidelity, maintaining several extramarital relationships. Before, when the detectives arrived at George's family mansion, Cynthia answered the door. She appeared disoriented, speaking slowly and in a confused manner. She claimed to already know about the murder because her husband showed her a newspaper that reported on Jeff's death on the front page. This event upset her. Cynthia was reluctant to answer many of their questions. She gave vague responses to some inquiries and ignored others altogether. Ed also responded evasively, denying any involvement of their family in the tragedy. They was clearly trying to avoid being connected to the investigation or appearing in police reports, as this could harm their reputation. Cynthia provided an alibi for both herself and Ed. Then that was verified. Surprisingly, Bonnie was fully aware of the affair between her husband and Cynthia. Jeff had informed his son about the relationship several years after it began. The reason for this disclosure was unclear. This painted a negative picture of Jeff's character. Bonnie suspected the affair as early as 1998, when she accidentally overheard a phone conversation between Jeff and Cynthia. Although she caught him being unfaithful, he managed to reassure her and deflect her concerns. Realizing she needed stronger evidence, Bonnie decided to spy on her husband and eventually confirmed her suspicions is right. By the end of 1999, Jeff confessed that he had been involved with Cynthia for 10 years. He claimed that their relationship had ended, and they were now just business partners. The mother of Jeff supported Bonnie's claims, stating that she was aware of her son's infidelities, including his involvement with Cynthia. Jeff frequently shared his personal thoughts with his mother, but she also insisted that he loved and respected Bonnie. After speaking with close friends of the George family, the police uncovered several intriguing details. Jeff met Cynthia at a club in 1991, where he pretended to be a doctor. When Cynthia discovered he was lying, he created a new story, claiming to be a special agent. This deception captivated Cynthia, a socialite. Interestingly, it was Cynthia who wrote the check to purchase the machines, not her husband. Her feelings for Jeff Stem was explained by Ed's preoccupation with work, which leaves her feeling neglected. Some suspected that Ed might have been aware of it for years. However, his strong Catholic beliefs prevented him from ending his marriage to the mother of his 7 children. Others thought he was completely unaware of the situation and blindly trusted his attractive wife. During the interrogation, the nanny shared valuable insights. She, describing Cynthia as self-centered, noted that Cynthia paid little attention to their children. She also saw Cynthia and Jeff, along with their children. She mentioned that Jeff treated his mistress similarly to how he treated his wife, including an incident where he hit Cynthia in public, leaving a bruise on her face. Additionally, it was revealed that Cynthia's youngest daughter might have been the result of an affair, as Jeff showed a lot of affection towards little girl and even took her for walks. It seemed unlikely that someone like him would invest time in another person's child. Due to these suspicions, Cynthia's youngest daughter had to undergo a DNA test, which confirmed that Jeff was indeed her father. After leaving the doctor's office with little girl, Ed stated that he didn't care about her biological parentage. He would love her, just like he loved his other children. Eventually, Cynthia admitted to having an affair with Jeff, but she kept her other secret relationships hidden. It's difficult to believe that Ed wasn't deeply troubled by his wife's infidelity at that moment. A few weeks before the murder, Ed tried to address some issues. He apparently suspected that Jeff was having an affair with Cynthia and wanted to protect her from him. However, Jeff refused the restraining order. Furthermore, Jeff's son reported that his father has shown fearful of Ed in the weeks leading up to the incident, making Ed the primary suspect. However, detectives lacked evidence to prove his involvement. Ed's alibi checked out, but this did not eliminate the possibility that he might have hired someone to commit the crime. A reward was offered for information regarding the murder. An informant, the ex-girlfriend of a man named John Zaffino, reached out to the police. She recalled that in 2001, John had mentioned beating up an Israeli. After hearing about the murder of Jeff Zach, who was identified as a former Israeli paratrooper with gray hair, she wondered if there was a connection. She contacted John, but he was evasive. It also came to light that John owned the same type of motorcycle that was seen at the scene of Jeff's murder. This prompts law enforcement to focus on the 36-year-old John, who had a reputation for being very cruel and dangerous. Immediately after, she ended the relationship because she feared for her safety. After experiencing multiple incidents of domestic violence, the woman decided to call John and asked several leading questions. Through their conversation, it became apparent that John might be involved in Jeff's death. She also engaged in several more similar phone calls, attempting to extract a confession from him. But he responded in a paranoid manner, avoiding direct answers. Upon investigating John, it was discovered that he had access to a .357 Magnum weapon, which was the same type as the Jeff's murder weapon. Interestingly, it was also confirmed by multiple witnesses that he knew Cynthia. The story is reenacted that Cynthia met John, an unemployed truck driver, in 2000, and they began an affair while she was still in a relationship with Jeff. 9 months later, in May 2001, she decided to end her relationship with Jeff and asked him to stop contacting her. However, Jeff was persistent and continued to call. Cynthia's husband noticed these unusual phone calls and suspected her. Whenever he picked up, the caller would hang up immediately. Ed did not want a public investigation and public attention to his private life, so he did nothing. Yet, he suspected that at the center of this problem was his wife's relationship with John. Details of their relationship become clearer when several expensive purchases give John are discovered. John claimed he was at a car dealership about 40 minutes from the crime scene at the time of the attack. However, the investigation revealed that he was actually on a mobile phone call and his location was tracked to a gas station. He only arrived at the car dealership 2 hours later. Investigators were able to track John's geolocation and review his phone records, leading them to suspect that Cynthia had ordered the crime. Adding to the evidence, a voice analysis confirmed that a threatening phone call received by Jeff was directed at John. The police believed that Jeff had begun threatening Cynthia when she decided to end their relationship, which he strongly opposed, which was quite consistent with Jeff's temperament. Feeling threatened, Cynthia decided to take action against him. On the tragic morning following an argument with his wife and son, Jeff looked up information about Cynthia, who he was deeply infatuated with and wanted to keep. The prosecution presented a clear narrative, but there was no evidence implicating Cynthia, so only John was taken into custody. John Zaffino's trial started on February 26, 2003. When called to testify on March 7, Cynthia chose to invoke her Fifth Amendment right, which allows her to avoid self-incrimination. Ed made the same choice. The main witness for the prosecution was John's ex-girlfriend, who detailed events from John's life leading up to the murder. The investigators also provided the murder weapon and confirmed that John owned it. Ballistic tests eliminated any doubts about this connection. However, there were no eyewitnesses identifying John as the perpetrator, nor was there any DNA evidence at the crime scene which made the prosecutor's job more challenging. On March 10, 2003, after 4 hours of deliberation, John Zaffino was convicted of conspiracy to commit murder. He was sentenced to life in prison with the possibility of parole. 23 years after the verdict, Bonnie approached John, stating that he was merely a pawn while Cynthia enjoyed a lavish lifestyle, asked if it was worth it. She likely hoped John would express his anger and reveal the truth, but he chose to remain silent. For a long time, the police lacked solid evidence against Cynthia. To bring her to justice, they gathered information about her involvement, piece by piece. On January 10, 2005, Cynthia was arrested while shopping. Ed posted bail of $2 million, allowing her to remain at home until her trial began in November 2005. The case gained momentum when new evidence emerged. Investigators discovered that John had planned to attack Jeff on May 8 while Jeff was relaxing in a national park. During this time, John was on a bridge talking on the phone with Cynthia for about 3 hours. She was also on another call with Jeff, coordinating their actions. The attack was interrupted when a park ranger noticed John's weapon case. When questioned, John claimed this was a misunderstanding and waiting for his girlfriend. A week later, a mushroom picker found a weapon in the park, which provided indirect evidence of Cynthia's involvement in the conspiracy. Ed hired a strong defense team of 5 lawyers for his wife, significantly reducing the prosecution's chances of success. During the trial, many revealing details emerged about Cynthia and her affair with John. The investigators was noted that Cynthia even paid for John's lawyers. One significant piece of evidence included recorded phone conversations between John and his sisters, which featured incriminating remarks in which he pressured Cynthia to uphold her part of their agreement. The defense argued that Cynthia had no reason to want Jeff dead and no motive to be involved in a murder plot. In contrast, the prosecution firmly claimed that Cynthia had a motive for the murder. After their breakup, Jeff tried to keep Cynthia in his life. They frequently argued, especially concerning their daughter, whom he threatened to take with him to Israel. Cynthia also felt at risk of their affair being revealed by Jeff, which could lead to her public humiliation. During the trial, 2 letters from Cynthia to John, who was in prison, were presented. These letters revealed their ongoing romantic relationship and showed that she remained deeply connected to him. In one letter, she sent him a Bible and expressed that she frequently prays for him. After facing public humiliation due to Cynthia's actions, Ed defended her against conspiracy charges. He emphasized his commitment to their marriage vows and refused to seek a divorce. Surprisingly, Cynthia chose not to testify in her defense, and John also did not take the stand. Ultimately, Cynthia was found guilty of conspiracy to commit murder and received, with the possibility of parole in a year. After the trial, Ed continued to defend his wife. He hired new lawyers who filed an appeal on her behalf. Cynthia served 16 months before she was released on March 22 after Ohio's 9th District Court of Appeals ruled that the circumstantial evidence presented by prosecutors, including phone records, correspondence, and financial documents, was insufficient to prove her guilty. Cynthia continues to live a normal life now. Welcome back to our channel. Today, we will explore a new case, the case of Nohima Graber. When a student at Fairfield High School received his Spanish test results, he found that his entire exam had been marked in red pen. He had failed because received a low grade. He was furious in front of his classmates, but the teacher reassured him, stating that she believed in his abilities and that he just needed to prepare better for the next test. Little did the elderly woman know that this would later have a tragic effect on her life. Fairfield is a small, quiet town in the southeastern part of the state of Quince, with a population of around 99,000 people. It features beautiful architecture and has about 12 parks and recreational areas, which is a significant number for a town of its size. One of these parks was a favorite walking spot for teacher Nohema Graber. She followed a daily routine of taking a certain number of steps to stay active and maintain her health, enjoying the tranquility and beauty of nature. However, on November 2, 2021, after finishing her workday, Nohema was tragically killed, leaving the residents of Fairfield in shock and fear. What a devastating event for their once peaceful town. Nohema was born on November 10, 1954, in Jalapa, Mexico, where she grew up in a loving family. From a young age, she was known for her openness and kindness. At the age of 20, Nohema began her career as a flight attendant for a major Mexican airline, which allowed her to indulge her passion for travel and an active lifestyle. She became one of the first women in Mexico to train as a pilot, paving the way for future female pilots in this challenging yet prestigious field. In 1985, at the age of 31, Nohema met Paul Graber, who was visiting Mexico on a business trip. They first encountered each other at a nightclub. After their meeting, Paul received Nohema's phone number and called her a few days later. Initially, he thought she was ignoring him, but she agreed to go on a date. Their relationship quickly blossomed into a romance. After a year of dating, on October 4, 1986, Nohema and Paul got married in Mexico. They then settled in Nohema's hometown, where she continued her work in the airline industry while Paul found a job in this new country. In 1991, after 5 years of marriage, the Graber family welcomed their first child, a son named Christian. A year later, they had another son, Jareth. Nohema, who was 37 and had worked for 17 years, decided to focus on her family. During the 1990s, the area where they lived became increasingly dangerous, prompting they to make the significant decision to leave Mexico and move to America, Paul's homeland. In 1992, they settled in Fairfield, where Paul found a well-paying job and supported the family, while Nohema became a stay-at-home mom. Soon after, she gave birth to their daughter, Naima. Nohema quickly adapted to life in the U.S. and began attending St. Mary's Catholic Church, where she made a donation and eventually became a community leader. As time went on, their children grew up and began to move out, leaving Nohema feeling bored and lacking purpose. Once she turned 50, she decided to pursue further education and enrolled at Westland University in Mount Plant, Iowa. There, she earned a degree in English and a teaching certificate. Nohema then secured a job at a high school in Atashtat, Iowa, where she taught Spanish for several years, gaining valuable experience. In 2012, Nohema began teaching at Fairfield High School. Her students and colleagues appreciated her greatly, often speaking of her fondly. Graduates would send her postcards and letters, and she made it a point to respond, and always ending her replies with her signature message, "Be more confident." On November 2, 2021, after school, Nohema drove to the park. She was active and enjoyed walking, but that day she did not return home. Her husband, Paul, grew concerned when she didn't answer his calls. He went to the park and searched their usual spots, but he was unable to find her anywhere, and her car, a blue 1997 Honda Odyssey, was also missing. Feeling anxious, Paul promptly contacted the police to report. Right away, a search began in the park for Nohema. Her colleagues reported that she had not shown up for work, and since the previous evening, she had stopped responding to calls and messages. Meanwhile, students contacted the police with information about their classmate. They revealed that the night before, he had shared disturbing photos on social network. These photos were sent by Jeremy Goodale, a 16-year-old student at Fairfield High School. Born in 2005, Jeremy grew up in a dysfunctional family with 4 older siblings. His parents frequently argued and were often absent, leaving the older children to care for the younger ones. Eventually, the parents divorced, the mother moved in with another man, leaving her children behind to live with their father in the family home. The living conditions in the house were chaotic. It was filled with dirt and dust, flies buzzed around, and the bed linens had gone unchanged for months. They washed only once a week. The children lacked female care and love, so looked unkempt. Jeremy was described by his classmates as a quiet and modest boy who played on a baseball team. He didn't stand out much, except for his messy appearance. However, Jeremy faced more serious issues. He struggled with depression, anxiety, and attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. Doctors prescribed him medication to help. He studied Spanish with a teacher named Nohima, and his best friend was Willard Miller. Unlike Jeremy, Willard came from a wealthy family, but he found school challenging, particularly with foreign languages. Willard had recently transferred to Fairfield High School after attending a prestigious school with a tougher curriculum. On November 3, the body of Nohima was discovered near the railway in the north. She was lying on the ground wrapped in a tarpaulin, covered with old sleepers, various garbage, branches, and leaves. At the time of the discovery, she had died many hours ago. An initial examination revealed that Nohima died from blunt force trauma to the head. What does that mean? Her death was a homicide, and that her body had been deliberately concealed. Witnesses reported seeing Nohima's Honda Odyssey leave the park around 5:00 p.m. She had spent approximately 45 minutes there. However, the witnesses could not identify or describe the actual driver. Shortly afterward, the police found her blue Honda abandoned on a country road south of where her body was located. Another witness later came forward, stating they saw two young men walking along this same road around 5:30 p.m., heading back to the park. One of them was pushing an old garden wheelbarrow. Unfortunately, this witness could not describe the young men and did not remember their faces. Based on the suspicious photo that went viral, the police arrived at Jeremy's house. He seemed agitated. Although he knew that the teacher was missing, he was unaware that her body had already been discovered. He denied any involvement in her disappearance, but was not informed about what the police had found at his home. Detectives discovered a blood-stained baseball bat and several black hairs in his house. They also found clothes and a blood-stained terry towel belonging to him. On Jeremy's phone, they found a text file titled "Preparation," which detailed the items needed for a planned act, including rubber gloves, wet wipes, a backpack, a bag, a blanket, a garden wheelbarrow, and other supplies. The file also outlined a step-by-step plan of actions. After the officers finished inspecting Jeremy's house, they proceeded to Willard's home. At that time, Willard, like Jeremy, was unaware that their teacher had already been found dead. Willard remained calm during the police questioning and readily discussed how he and Jeremy had walked in the local park the previous evening. However, he became visibly nervous when the conversation shifted to Nohima. His demeanor changed as he mentioned that Nohima did not regard him highly and often underestimated him. Meanwhile, the community of Fairfield was shocked and mourned the passing of Nohima, as she was known to be kind, compassionate, and always helpful to her students, leaving everyone puzzled about why anyone would want to harm her. After searches of the houses, Jeremy Gudella and Willard Miller were arrested and taken into custody on suspicion of murdering their Spanish language teacher. During their interrogation, they were informed that the body had been discovered. Both provided similar accounts of the events. They admitted to walking in the park that afternoon when they encountered their teacher. They greeted her, but suddenly, a group of masked individuals attacked Nohima, hitting her on the head with a bat, causing her to lose consciousness and fall. Jeremy and Willard claimed they were forced to watch as the assailants continued to assault her. They alleged that they were then told to hide the body, take her car, and abandon it near a country road. Jeremy and Willard denied any wrongdoing, asserting that they were merely witnesses to the murder and had been compelled to obey the orders of the true criminals. However, evidence found in Jeremy's house suggested otherwise. The blood and hair found on the baseball bat, as well as the blood on Jeremy's clothes and towel, all belonged to Nohima. Furthermore, there were no witnesses who saw a group of masked individuals or any strangers in the park. A notebook discovered in Jeremy's house revealed that he and his friends had been stalking Nohima for several weeks. They recorded the times her classes ended, when she left school, how long she spent in her car, and where she went afterward. This detailed documentation of Nohima's schedule indicated that it was easy for them to predict her daily movements. The young men knew that Nohima walked in the park every day and were familiar with this route. They chose the right moment to attack Nohima while she was walking alone on a dark, deserted street. During questioning, Willard admitted that he disliked Nohima because he felt she always underestimated him. He acknowledged that he frequently argued with her during class, and his classmates had witnessed these confrontations. These two young men told conflicting stories. This time, Jeremy accused Willard of hitting Nohima, while Willard insisted he had not touched her, claiming that it was Jeremy who had killed her. During the investigation, the investigators was uncovered that on the day of the incident, Jeremy and Willard went to a park and concealed themselves in an out-of-the-way spot while they waited. When Nohima arrived, one of them struck her on the head with a bat, causing her to lose consciousness and collapse. The two then dragged her off the path and took turns assaulting her until she died. Afterward, they covered her body with branches and leaves before fleeing the scene in her car, which they abandoned on a country road. While walking, they made their way to Willard's house, where they took a garden wheelbarrow, a shovel, and a tarpaulin. They returned to the crime scene, wrapped the victim in the tarpaulin, placed her in the wheelbarrow, and transported her to the railroad tracks. There, they concealed the body by placing old railway sleepers, garbage, branches, and fallen leaves on top. Once the body was hidden, Jeremy and Willard returned home and attempted to clean up any evidence of their crime, believing they would never be discovered. Detectives discovered unusual search queries on Willard's phone, including, "Do students receive credit for a lesson if a teacher is seriously injured or dies during a course?" And, "What happens to students' work if a teacher dies mid-course?" Before the incident, Willard had planned a trip to Spain, but after receiving a low grade on a test, that trip became uncertain. Prosecutors viewed Willard as the main instigator of the crime, driven by a desire for revenge against the teacher, while his friend Jeremy appeared to be following Willard's lead. Additionally, Jeremy struggled with depression and anxiety, which made him emotionally vulnerable and easier to manipulate. This made him a more suitable accomplice for Willard's malicious scheme. During his trial in December 2021, Jeremy pleaded guilty to first-degree murder and agreed to testify against Willard. In his testimony, Jeremy claimed that Willard was the first to attack their teacher, Nohima Graber, on the afternoon of November 2, 2021, when they both invited her out. He stated that Willard pushed her, causing her to fall and sustain serious injuries. However, Jeremy also confessed that after Nohima lost consciousness, he used a baseball bat to strike her multiple times, resulting in her death. Jeremy claimed that he and Willard beat her together to ensure that Nohima would not survive. Throughout the trial, Jeremy continually cried and asked for forgiveness from the family of the deceased. He expressed deep remorse for what had happened. Willard also admitted his guilt, but maintained that Jeremy had delivered the first blow. In court, Willard was more composed. Like Jeremy, he sought forgiveness from the Graber family. He said, "I am truly sorry for the pain I caused you. I regret that your family is suffering because of me. I sincerely apologize from the bottom of my heart. I fully recognize the seriousness of my actions. I know I was wrong." Willard Miller was the first to be sentenced in June 2023, receiving a life sentence with the possibility of parole after 35 years. Sadly, another tragic event occurred following this story. Nohima's husband, Paul Graber, passed away in June 2023 from terminal cancer. Paul, 68, was buried the day before Willard's verdict was announced, and he never saw his wife's killers face justice. Paul's family and friends reported that he was deeply affected by his wife's death. They believed that if Nohema had been alive, she would have noticed Paul's illness early and sought timely treatment, which might have saved his life. In November 2023, Jeremy Goodale was found guilty in connection with the case of Nohema and sentenced to life in prison, with the possibility of parole after 25 years. During the trial, Jeremy was so distraught that he experienced a nosebleed and cried. He expressed regret, saying, "I wish I could turn back time to prevent this loss and the pain I caused the family. It was the worst decision of my life, and I take full responsibility for what I did." Nohema Graber had 3 adult children, brothers, sisters, nephews, and nieces, who certainly miss their beloved and caring mother. They fondly remember their mother and father. It is known that the sons and daughter forgave the murderers and try not to remember them. After their mother's death, one of the sons found their mother's personal diary. In it, she wrote short notes about her life, expressing that she loved teaching and adored her students very much. Nohema wrote that she would always smile and give her students support, stating that even if she could not teach them anything new, just looking at her would help the students learn to love life. Welcome back to our channel. Today we will explore a new case. The case of Aaron Barley. Kindness is not just a gift given, but sometimes also a double-edged sword if misplaced. When compassion is betrayed, will what we give become the seeds of a tragedy? Peter Wilkinson, 47, and his wife, Tracy, 50, lived in Stourbridge, in the English county of Westminster. They had 2 children, a daughter, Lydia, who studied biology at Bristol University, and a son, Pierce, who was 13. Despite the fact that Lydia was much older and studying at university, away from the family, the brother and sister communicated every day and shared an extremely close relationship. Tracy Wilkinson was a generous and compassionate woman. A former Latin American champion in ballroom dancing, she became a volunteer to work with elderly people and could talk to anyone to make them feel at ease. She often helped the homeless and never refused to assist those in need. Tracy was a housewife while her husband had his own business. One day in March 2016, Tracy went to the supermarket to do her weekly shopping. After leaving, she noticed a young man named Aaron Barley who was sleeping on the street in a cardboard box. Seeing how he suffered from his situation, Tracy felt sorry for him and decided to invite him to her home on Greyhound Lane. Aaron had dinner with the Wilkinson family, and Tracy decided to do everything in her power to help him get back on his feet. She took Aaron to the city council office, and with their help, he managed to find new housing in a hostel. From that moment, Tracy always tried to ensure that Aaron had hot and fresh food. Such care and concern were extremely rare for Aaron, as his life had been chaotic from the very beginning. Born in 1993 as a result of incest, his parents were his uncle and niece, with a 19-year age difference. His mother worked in a factory, and his father was an innkeeper. By the age of 10, Aaron became an orphan. His father died of cancer when he was 4, and 2 years later, his mother had a heart attack, leading him to spend his entire childhood in orphanages and various foster families. During this period, he faced violence. When Aaron was 13 years old, he is at the center of an investigation into a missing person case, and his photo was circulated in the media after he went missing, with 2 boys in Bromsgrove. Luckily, he was found and received proper medical care. As Aaron got older, he started sleeping on the streets. He also became addicted to banned substance and alcohol. However, it seemed that after meeting Tracy, his life started to improve. He appeared grateful for the help and support Meanwhile, the Wilkinson family decided to do whatever it took to help him get through life as hard. One day during dinner with Wilkinson family, Aaron said that he just needed someone to give him a chance. Tracy herself has struggled with alcoholism in the past and was now volunteering at a rehab center that had helped her overcome it. She knew from her own experience how debilitating addiction could be and wanted to do everything she could to help him. Peter decided to get Aaron a job as a laborer at one of his businesses in Newport. For 5 months, it seemed that Aaron's life was getting better. He had a steady income, a roof over his head, and a family that truly cared about him. But soon, everything fell apart. In September, Aaron relapsed and started using illegal substances again. He explained that the reason was because his mother had recently passed away, but this was a complete lie. He became constantly drunk, stopped showing up for work on time, and exhibited aggression towards other employees. Peter decided to fire him. Everything ended peacefully, and the Wilkinson family lost contact with him. After only a couple of months, Peter found Aaron sleeping next to their house, covered in bruises, which indicated that he had been attacked. They decided to give Aaron another chance, helped him find a new place to live, and he earned money doing odd jobs for them. He spent Christmas with them and gave Tracy a card signed, "For the mother I never had." For the new year, Aaron had a new flat in Briarley Hill, and he now had a full-time job. A couple of times a week, he had dinner with the Wilkinson family, and it seemed that everything was getting better. Unfortunately, soon after, Aaron was fired from his job as a furniture polisher, and he lost his home. The Wilkinsons allowed him to stay with them again for 2 weeks until he found a job. On March 26, 2017, Lydia returned home from university and surprised her mother by hiding in the family Land Rover for Mother's Day. When Tracy opened the trunk and saw Lydia, they both cried tears of joy at their reunion. What a pity, Lydia's visit was brief, as she soon had to leave for Bristol to continue her studies. Just 4 days later, on March 30, 2017, at around 10:00 a.m., Lydia received a distressing call from her boyfriend informing her that a crime had occurred in her hometown. Upon reading the news, Lydia saw images of her house surrounded by police tape and emergency services. Alarmed, she immediately contacted the police to learn what had happened, and the news she received was horrifying. That day, Peter had taken his greyhound, Mendy, for their usual morning walk, leaving Tracy and Pierce at home. He had invited Pierce to join him, but Pierce declined, saying he would walk later. When Peter returned home, he noticed the house was unusually quiet, and there was no tea on the kitchen table, a routine his wife usually followed. As Peter entered the house, a man wearing a balaclava attacked him from behind the kitchen wall, raising a knife over his head. Peter suffered 6 stab wounds, 2 in his back, 2 in his stomach, and 2 in his face. During the assault, the attacker screamed, "Die," and curse. Although the attacker was trying to conceal his identity with the mask, Peter instantly recognized him. After the first stab, Peter pleaded, "We are trying to help you." But he responded with increasing rage, then shouting again, "Die," as he delivered another blow to Peter's stomach. Following the attack, Aaron stole the Wilkinsons' Land Rover parked outside and drove away. Despite serious injuries, Peter managed to call 911 and made his way to the garden, collapsing on a chair. Emergency services arrived in just 7 minutes. 2 ambulances and 2 helicopters were dispatched to quickly take the victims to hospital. When the police and medical staff arrived, they encountered a horrific scene inside the house. Peter directed them to Tracy and Pierce to check on their well-being. Police comments: Tracy had been stabbed at least 17 times and was found naked in her bedroom under a duvet, indicating she had been attacked while she was sleeping. She was pronounced dead at the crime scene. Her son, Pierce, suffered 8 stab wounds, one of which was so severe that it nearly ruptured his back. He was found gasping for air on the floor. Right away, Peter and Pierce was rushed to Birmingham for medical attention, but sadly, Peter lost both his wife and son. After police tracked the Wilkinson family's car, they quickly located Aaron, so he was quickly apprehended. Why? A bloody knife wrapped in a wet shirt was also discovered in the car. For Lydia, the unfolding nightmare was unimaginable. She had planned to return home the following day to choose a dress for the university ball and had promised Pierce she would pick him up from school. Now, all those plans would never come to fruition. As soon as she arrived in her hometown, she went directly to her father before his life-saving surgery. Seeing him in the hospital, surrounded by medical equipment and tubes, was heartbreaking. While Peter fought for his life, Lydia had the painful task of identifying the bodies of her younger brother and mother. Lydia recalled, "I went into the house and sat with my mom and brother. I told them I was sorry I couldn't protect them and stroked their hair. I decided to stay there for a while because I knew it would be the last time I would see them." After the doctor's efforts, Peter survived and spent a total of 11 days in the hospital, 6 of which were in intensive care. The community in Stonebridge was shocked by such a horrific event in their town. In a show of respect, flowers were placed around Wilkinson's house. Many people came to express their sorrow. Meanwhile, the police obtained surveillance camera footage from Wilkinson's house, revealing a disturbing sequence of events. The footage showed Aaron climbing over the fence into the garden behind the house. He had been hiding in the garden shed all night after failing to break into the house. In the morning, he waited for Peter to leave for his usual walk, then crawled into the house on all fours to avoid detection. Once inside, he put on a balaclava to conceal his identity, took 2 knives from the kitchen, and went upstairs. There, he brutally stabbed Tracy multiple times in her bed and did the same to Pierce. After the attack, he hid to waiting for Peter to return. After the murder, Aaron showed no remorse. He told a police officer, "I stabbed 3 people. I didn't even bother to take any of you." He also mentioned to the police officer that he had chopped them all up and insisted he wouldn't require a lawyer. Additionally, Aaron declined to take a toxicology test that could have established if he was under the influence of banned substance that morning. He also refused to explain his motives. While in custody, he boasted about killing a mother and her son and expressed satisfaction that they were dead. His only regret was failing to kill Peter. One uncertainty is why he committed this crime. Less than a week before the murder, the Wilkinson family ended their contract with Aaron's phone service because he hadn't contacted them for 3 weeks. Tracy had also mentioned to friends that she saw Aaron peering over their garden fence and had wished for his disappearance from their lives. Investigators said, "Aaron has a long history of violent and antisocial behavior. At the age of 11, he was abandoned by his foster family because of his aggressive actions towards other children. As he grew older, his violence escalated, particularly towards residents in the nursing home where he lived, and he claimed to be very disturbed. He frequently got into fights and even stole a staff member's car. At one point, he made a list of people he wanted to kill." Aaron has 21 prior convictions, the first occurring when he was just 12 years old for causing serious injury. His other offenses include assaulting a police officer, using illegal banned substance, and possessing illegal weapons. He once attacked his ex-girlfriend with a piece of wood, hitting her 50 times, and attempted to stab her after she broke the wood in half. For this assault, he was sentenced to 3 years in prison at the age of 18. Volunteers at the rehabilitation center where Aaron was held reported that he expressed a desire to kill someone with a knife. They also noted that he had 2 main goals: to kill a prison officer and to kill a police officer. However, his comments were largely dismissed since they believed he made these statements while under the influence of illegal banned substance. Before, he attended a special school, but his social interactions were limited, as everyone who knew him avoided him. Additionally, a police report was filed against him after his former foster guardian became alarmed by his Facebook posts. In one of these posts, he threatened his former family, with whom he claimed he hadn't spoken in years, and expressed a desire for specialized help, warning that he might commit mass murder if he didn't receive it. In February 2017, just a month before he murdered the Wilkinson family, he met with a project employee for support. This employee concluded that Aaron sought to manipulate the people around him and to have absolute control over them. calculating every step he took. In one of his text messages, Aaron wrote that he was a beast, adding, "Stay a beast, change the victim." On Wednesday, June 7, 2017, Pierce and Tracy Wilkinson's funeral was held at St. Mary's Church. Lydia and Peter decided to bury both of their loved ones in the same coffin. The priest who presided over the ceremony was moved to say, "You may be surprised to see only one coffin, but they are forever inseparable, just as they were together when they were alive." On the first day of his trial at Birmingham Crown Court, Aaron pleaded guilty to 2 counts of murder and 1 count of attempted murder. As the judge read the charges against him, Aaron rocked back and forth in the dock and shouted, "I did what I did. I don't have to stand here and lie." Psychiatric evaluations found no grounds for mitigating Aaron Barley's guilt. Prosecutor Kareem Khalil described Aaron as deceitful and manipulative. One of Aaron's former caregivers noted that he could be sensitive and caring, but he could also be cruel and threatening. A former resident of the nursing home where Aaron lived said that, aside from anger, he rarely showed any emotion. They never saw Aaron cry and noted that he rarely seemed affected by anything that happened around him. They observed that Aaron was the type of person who could witness terrible things happening and still stand still, not crying, not worrying. He seemed physically present, but completely detached emotionally. Aaron's attorney argued that Aaron's childhood was unstable, preventing him from staying in one place for long. He claimed that Aaron had borderline personality disorder and felt abandoned by his family. However, this diagnosis was never confirmed because it was widely acknowledged that the Wilkinson family had treated him with exceptional kindness. In court, Lydia Wilkinson confronted Aaron, stating, "My parents helped you, and you repay them with emotional suffering. You ruined lives and took half of my family away. I have become a shadow of my former self. Sometimes I wake up wishing I wasn't here. What did they do to deserve such a fate?" She also expressed that she would never forgive Aaron for his actions. After her statement, it appeared that Aaron began to cry and softly said, "And I'm very sorry." The judge commended Lydia for her courage and maturity, noting that she had shown strength beyond her years. However, he pointed out that Lydia was struggling with anxiety attacks and could no longer be left alone. Peter, who also testified, expressed confusion about Aaron's actions, saying, "We have no explanation for what he did. He chose to take out his frustrations on the people who cared for him. I wish I had never met him. I wish my wife hadn't seen him in the cardboard box." Aaron Barley was sentenced to life in prison with a minimum of 30 years before he would be eligible for parole. While the judge gave him this opportunity, she also warned him that Aaron might never be released, depending entirely on his behavior and rehabilitation while serving his sentence. However, Aaron remained expressionless throughout the trial, showing no reaction. The 3-judge panel then decided to increase the minimum sentence to 35 years, reflecting the severity of Aaron's crimes. Now, Aaron will only be eligible for parole after serving at least 35 years and proving that he is no longer a threat to society. Whether or not he will ever be free is a question that only time will tell. Peter and Lydia continued to live in their home on Greyhound Lane. Peter said, "This is our home, and we couldn't let him take anything else away from us. We love this house. It's like a family home that we built ourselves, and we love living here." They also received support from a local priest, who blessed each room in the house. Lydia returned to university with the hope of becoming a medical researcher. She said she wanted to continue the work her mother would do, helping and supporting others, and that it was important to her to focus her energy on making something positive out of the tragedy. Lydia raised £133,000 British pounds for Birmingham Children's Hospital, which fought so hard to save her brother's life. While the loss of Tracy and Pierce can never be replaced, but their legacy will live on through the children that Lydia's organizations have cared for. Welcome back to our channel. Today we will explore a new case. The case of Debany Escobar. These events took place in the state of Nuevo León, Mexico on April 9, 2022. A disturbing image appeared on social media. In the photo, a young girl was standing on the side of the road. She was wearing a white top, brown shorts, and black Converse shoes, and her hair was down. The caption of the post with the photo said, "Yes, it's true." The girl's name was Debany Escobar. She was 18 years old. The last time she was seen was late on the night of April 9 after a party where she was with her friends. It all started on Friday, April 8, when Debany, a student at the Faculty of Law at the University of Nuevo León in Monterrey, decided to go for a walk with her friends. At about 11 p.m., she left her house. Two of her friends, Sarai and Vaughn, met her on Simon Bolivar Street to go to a party together. At 11:30 p.m., a CCTV camera from one of the stores recorded how the three girls were buying drinks. They were there for some time and then decided to go to the party just a few blocks away. However, upon arrival, they found themselves in an unpleasant situation, which led them to decide to go to another party taking place at the Quinta Diamante estate in General Escobedo. They ordered a taxi using the Didi app, which came to pick them up at 12:49 a.m. When they arrived at the location, it became clear that the party had already ended. However, the girls noticed that not far away, on the same street, another party was taking place, called Cantal Diamant. The surveillance Sierra footage shows the girls getting out of a white Kia Rio at 1:20 a.m. And only Sarai and Debany exited the car. A little later, they reached the entrance to the club. After 9 minutes, the camera filmed Debany walking in the opposite direction from the entrance. After a few seconds, she returned and everything seemed fine. But at 3:45 a.m., the camera recorded Debany running out of the club. A young man ran after her and tried to grab her. She hit him and tried to run away, but he did not let her. After that, they began to quarrel, and another guy came out to witness the altercation. After that, the girls called a familiar driver to pick them up. The driver informed her that he was nearby and would arrive in 10 or 15 minutes. A moment later, when the driver arrived, Debany got in the car, leaving her friends behind. Another camera recorded the car, showing that Debany was arguing with the driver. 8 minutes later, the driver sent a message to her friend, stating that Debany had exited the car and refused to continue the ride. The driver informed that there had been an argument between him and Debany, due to which she chose to leave the car and did not want to return. He took the photo as proof that he left her on the side of the road. Debany's friends were uncertain about what to do next. They asked the driver to contact the police, but he declined, stating he had to leave for work. A few minutes later, he returned to the area, but Debany was no longer there. He informed her friends that she was missing and suggested that Debany appeared to be in poor condition, potentially under the influence of banned substance, as her speech was incoherent. The friends attempted to contact her parents, but no one answered. The conversation between the driver and Debany's friends ended at 5:16 a.m., and since then, they had not heard from her. The next day, Debany's friends were able to contact her father, Mario Escobar, they wanting to find out what had happened. Her parents were also unaware of the situation, and they promptly filed a report with the police. Photos of Debany were shared on social media, and a search effort began. On April 9, while authorities were looking for Debany, the body of a missing girl named Maria Fernanda Contreras was discovered in a house in the Apodaca area. This was one of 5 bodies found during the search for Debany. Within just 6 days, the remains of these 5 women were uncovered, which left the community in shock. 2 days after Debany went missing, a girl who was also at the party that Debany attended told on her Instagram that some people tried to help Debany and offered to take her home so that she could come to her senses. However, Debany's friend did not want this, since supposedly some trusted person was supposed to come for them, so the story took on a different character. Now Debany's friends were the main suspects. All this was very strange, and as time went on, the case became more and more complicated. At that point, the investigation had made little progress. On April 15, a reward of 100,000 Mexican pesos was announced for information about Debani. From this reward, the prosecutor's office in Nuevo León obtained a video showing Debani at 4:29 a.m., just 4 minutes after the driver had photographed her. In the video, she is seen walking toward the building of the international transport company Alcocia. She then crossed the road and approached the building's facade and vanished. With access to this video, it was believed that Debani might have gone to the transport company for help. However, the camera did not capture her entering or exiting the building. This was the last footage of Debani, leading to suspicions that the transport company could be involved in her disappearance. So, there was still hope of finding Debani alive. On April 19, the police initiated a search of the Alcocia company building. They examined all vehicles and accessed surveillance cameras, but found nothing of interest. Following this, they conducted a search in a residential building in central Monterrey, located 22 kilometers from where Debani was last seen. The police received tips that Debani's personal belongings were in apartment number 18. 2 days earlier, the GPS on her phone indicated activity in that location, as well as at the corner of the Nueva Castilla motel. The following day, police, volunteers, and canine units searched the nearby highway for evidence. They inspected a manhole in a vacant lot next to the Nueva Castilla motel. Additionally, workers from the Monterrey Water Service searched a manhole along the highway where she was last seen. However, at that point, the investigation had made little progress. At the request of Mario, a team from the National Search Commission was called in to assist with the search. That Thursday afternoon, a group of volunteers joined the effort. Police received reports from the staff at the Nueva Castilla motel about a foul odor coming from an unused tank. Officers quickly arrived at the scene, and within minutes, they discovered a body. Although it was initially unclear if the body belonged to Debani, divers confirmed that it was wearing the same clothes she had on the day she went missing. Mario identified her by a cross she was wearing. The police also requested security camera footage from the motel, but the staff claimed the cameras only displayed live footage and did not record. Meanwhile, Debani's body had been submerged in water for nearly 2 weeks, making it nearly unrecognizable and in a state of decomposition. Despite the clothing and accessories, DNA testing was necessary for identification. An autopsy conducted confirmed that the body was indeed Debani's, and the cause of death was determined to be a severe head injury by strong impact. Initial reports suggested that Debani's fall into the tank was not accidental, and her phone lost signal shortly after. There were no signs of violence on her body. The bruises might have been caused by a fall. However, there was swelling on her forehead and around her eyes, indicating inflammation from impact. At that time, it was believed that Debani could not have jumped over the 2-meter-high wall surrounding the motel to accidentally fall into a cistern that measured 90 by 98 centimeters and was 4.43 meters deep, with a water level of 90 centimeters. Because Debani was only 167 centimeters tall and the wall had barbed wire on top. Before the discovery, Debani's body, no one, including service dogs, noticed any unpleasant odors at the motel. Nueva Castilla had 3 tanks, with one of them clogged. In the first tank, where the body was found, they found her Converse sneakers and a piece of fabric with insects typically found on decomposing bodies. On the wall between the first and second tanks, a bag belonging to Debani was located. This bag contained a red plastic container, a white bra, 2 pieces of beige fabric, and a black and white fabric mask. In the second tank, investigators found a yellow and white lighter, 3 metal keys, a cell phone in a damaged black case, a wallet, and a plastic-wrapped gel-like substance. Conducting toxicology tests to check for alcohol or other substances in her system proved difficult. However, the presence of insects and worms feeding on the corpse might allow for DNA extraction to identify substances. The investigation agency analyzed that Nueva Castilla motel is not well known and appears abandoned from the outside. It sits along the highway leading to New Laredo, the main route between Monterey and the United States. This highway has earned a reputation for danger, as approximately 1,000 people went missing there last year. They found no signs of a break-in near the tanks, leading them to conclude that Deborah likely entered the motel through the main entrance of the restaurant. 2 days after the body was found, security camera footage from the motel was released. This was unusual because the staff had previously stated that the cameras only recorded in real time. The footage provided by the prosecutor's office shows the motel's restaurant and 2 glass doors, one facing the highway and the other leading to the tank area inside the motel. In the footage, Deborah is seen entering the motel at 4:33 a.m. Another camera captures her running to the motel, going around the restaurant, and reaching the glass door. When she noticed no one was there, she dashed to the corner of the restaurant, where she stayed for about 20 minutes. Then, she ran again along the wall of the hotel. This was the last confirmed sighting of her alive. Following a review of the surveillance footage, the prosecutor's office requested that the motel be placed under check. Investigators discovered that an outdoor camera at a neighboring restaurant recorded a car parked at the Nueva Castilla motel, where a man entered. They was believed that this man took Deborah away in that car. Days later, the car was identified, and the man who got in was also revealed. However, after being questioned, he was declared innocent of the case. Meanwhile, Mario sought external assistance to carry out a second autopsy and compare its findings with those of the first. Everyone was left wondering why Deborah exited the taxi that was supposed to take her home. New footage that surfaced in the media suggested that her departure might have been prompted by harassment from the taxi driver. In the video, the driver is seen extending his right hand toward the girl's chest, leading to speculation that she left the car due to his inappropriate behavior. In response to these allegations, taxi driver Juan appeared in the media on April 27 to share his side of the story. In the interview, Juan David denied any harassment, explaining that the footage actually captured him handing Deborah a phone charger because her phone battery had died. And he said his conversations with Deborah's friend, he shared an audio recording he made while Deborah was in his car. In the recording, she states, "My parents deserve the truth." Juan explained that she got into the car because she felt her friends from the party were bad influences. They didn't want to see her off. Deborah started crying, and Juan noted that she appeared to be in distress, possibly under the influence of banned substance, as her speech was unclear. He mentioned that, when he requested her home address to take her there, but she didn't respond. He then asked her friend for Deborah's mother's phone number, but they didn't have one. While driving on the highway, Deborah unexpectedly asked him to stop the car and then exited. Juan tried to persuade her to return while she stood by the roadside, but she did not come back. Then, he took a photo of Deborah and sent it to Deborah's friends to alert them to her location. 2 of Deborah's friends also gave an interview on television. The girls mentioned that at the party, Deborah was aggressive and did not accept help from anyone. She asked to be left alone. Sarai learned that Deborah had a disagreement with a group of people who wanted to take her home, which caused her to act oddly. Her friends suspected that something was wrong with her drink at the party, leading to her withdrawal from socializing with others. Eventually, she ran out of the club, and some guys tried to stop her. Others also came out to assist Deborah, but she reacted aggressively and insisted that they leave her alone. She mentioned that her parents were lawyers and offered money to anyone who would let her be. The girls ordered a taxi, using the same driver they had trusted before. When the taxi arrived, only Deborah got in, while this driver is different from the driver they want to see again. After leaving the party, the girls attempted to call Deborah's father multiple times between 3:50 a.m. and 4:30 a.m., but he did not answer. It wasn't until 8:35 a.m. that they finally reached him to ask if Deborah had made it home, only to discover that she was missing. One significant piece of evidence that prompted further investigation was a promotional video from the motel, which featured a song. The video not only showcased the motel, but also zoomed in on room 174. This raised suspicions that a motel worker might have been hinting at what happened in that room. As a result, the initial search lasted about 7 hours and yielded some evidence, along with previously overlooked surveillance footage. At the request of Debani's parents, room 174 was examined for blood traces, both inside the room and in the parking lot. The prosecutor's office announced that 5 individuals present at the motel that night have already been interviewed. A white truck was noted to have arrived shortly after Debani entered the hotel grounds. However, the last 8 or 9 minutes of the footage were missing, and they might contain crucial clues for solving the case. Experts are currently working to recover the potentially deleted records. On May 5, it was reported that Debani's ID, stolen from her 2.5 months prior during a robbery, was discovered. A resident of Building 15, where a search had already taken place, found the ID in a flower bed of the residential complex. Nonetheless, this find has not yet contributed to solving the case. Then, new information was reported in the media. Mario accused the Nuevo Leon prosecutor's office of hiding the results of a second autopsy on Debani's body. In there, the findings indicate that she did not suffer multiple blows to the head from blunt objects. However, medical examiners noted bruises on both sides of her head, her forehead, both eyelids, the left side of her nose, her lips, and around her ears. The report suggests that the varying severity of head injuries was likely caused by external impact, pointing to the likelihood that these injuries were inflicted by another person, this indicating a violent death rather than an accident. Furthermore, it was determined that Debani died before entering the water, as no water was found in her lungs. The report also revealed bruises and hematomas in the genital area, suggesting abuse violence. It dismissed the possibility of strangulation, since there were no injuries to her neck. This has highlighted the persistent negligence of the police. It is troubling that, in today's world, the authorities are not trustworthy. The case of Debani Susana Escobar is not only a personal tragedy, but also a powerful reminder of the violence against women in Mexico. To date, no one has been arrested or charged in connection with her death, leaving her family and the public questioning the justice system and the safety of women in society. Debani has become a symbol of the fight against gender-based violence, a problem that affects an average of 10 women every day in Mexico. Despite protests and constant pressure from the community, the investigation and prosecution process has been slow, leaving the quest for justice for these young women a significant question mark. Debani's death has not only left her family heartbroken, but has also sparked outrage and a determination for change in society. But will this voice and struggle be enough to bring justice and end similar tragedies? The answer still lies in the future.